Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable and relax. If you live in Menifee, California and there's a knock at your door tonight, don't answer it. More importantly, don't leave anyone in the house by themselves. Get your phone, call the police, and stay together. I'm relating this as I'm sitting in this police station questioning room as a warning, so that what happened to me last night won't happen to you tonight. I live on my own in suburbia. Nice little neighborhood, the kind of place where kids will be playing out in the street with parents doing yard work when you pull into your driveway. That's exactly how last night began. My girlfriend and I pulled in and hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable and relax. If you live in Menifee, California and there's a knock at your door tonight, don't answer it. More importantly, don't leave anyone in the house by themselves. Get your phone, call the police, and stay together. I'm relating this as I'm sitting in this police station questioning room as a warning, so that what happened to me last night won't happen to you tonight. I live on my own in suburbia. Nice little neighborhood, the kind of place where kids will be playing out in the street with parents doing yard work when you pull into your driveway. That's exactly how last night began. My girlfriend and I pulled in and got out of the car. We waved to the kids and had a friendly chat with Mrs. Roop next door. This was the kind of life I always imagined, and at 20 I couldn't believe it had already happened for me. We went inside and started our evening. We made dinner. We love cooking together. There's a symmetry between us that just works. We ate, watched some TV downstairs, just a normal night. Once it was time we went upstairs, she started doing her nightly routine girls always do in the bathroom, and I just laid in bed, reading Pen Pal for the 20th time. With the fan going and the water running from the bathroom, I almost didn't hear it. I wish now that the fan was set to 3 instead of 2, because then everything would be different. But no, it was just faint enough for me to hear the sound over everything else. Knock, 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 I reached over and clicked the fan off. I waited for a moment listening. Knock, 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 God damn it, I thought. I put my book down on the nightstand and got up. I grabbed my zip-up off the chair and threw it on. As I walked out of the room, I could hear my girlfriend starting to say something, but I wanted to get rid of whoever was at the door first. I slumped down the stairs a little pissy, thinking that if this was another solicitor trying to sell me glass cleaner, I was going to have a fit. I zipped up the jacket as I flicked the light on next to the front door. I looked through the peephole, but it was pitch black. I flicked the outside light on, still pitch black. I figured the light bulb had gone out again, as I have had problems with it before. Reluctantly, I twisted the deadbolt and opened the door. Nothing. No one was there. I poked my head out to look around. The yard and driveway were empty. Looking back, I made so many horrible mistakes. I stepped out onto the welcome mat. The streets were empty and silent, minus the hum from the streetlights. I scoffed and figured it was the kids just trying to play a prank. I turned and walked back inside. After relocking the door and heading back for the stairs, I started to have a feeling. Something just didn't feel right in my stomach, and I knew that only one thing was going to put it at ease. Food. I walked down the hallway into the kitchen and flicked on the light. Opening up the fridge, I started to scan the shelves for something quick and easy to eat. I settled on one of those wafer peanut butter and chocolate bars that you can get at the dollar stores. I keep them in the fridge so they don't melt in my hand when I'm eating them. I peeled back the plastic wrapper, and as I was taking my first bite, I noticed something odd out of the corner of my eye. The window above the kitchen sink was open. I'd never opened that window for the entire time I'd lived here. I thought back trying to remember when it could have happened, and then I recalled her saying that she was feeling really hot while she was doing the dishes. She must have opened it to try and cool off. I walked over and slid it shut and finally made my way back upstairs. I walked back into the bedroom and the water was still running. I went to the entrance to the bathroom. Did you say something early? I began to stay but stopped. The bathroom was empty. Water continued to pour out of the faucet, steam floating up, clinging to the mirror. I stopped the water and turned around to scan the room. She wasn't there. "Amanda?" I called out, no answer. I went to the walk-in closet, nothing. I started to leave the room, but again something catches my eye. I glanced at my nightstand, and on top of my book was a piece of paper. It was folded in half and set up, making it look like a little tent. I reached out and picked it up. The first thing I obviously saw was the blood. It was a bloody fingerprint on the corner of the paper. My heart started to race. Finally, my brain let my eyes pan over to read what it said, and even now I wish it wouldn't have. "She's in the house. Find her." I read it those 6 words over and over. I looked around the room again, hoping to see Amanda just hiding in the corner, snickering like she'd pulled off an amazing prank. But the room was empty. I walked around the room, looking behind chairs, inside the shower, inside the closet. I looked at the bed and felt like a 6-year-old again as I slowly knelt down to look underneath. My hands had apparently been getting sweaty because they kept slipping slightly against the hardwood floor. I bent down and lifted the skirt of the bed. Nothing. Just a couple dust bunnies and an old pair of shoes that I keep meaning to throw out. I stood back up and started to become agitated. My mind didn't know whether this was a joke or if I needed to be terrified. "Amanda!" I yelled. "This isn't funny anymore, now just come out." Silence. "Look, I'm really freaked out, so stop this." I walked out into the upstairs hallway and quickly went through all the rooms. The spare bedroom, empty. The exercise room, empty. Other upstairs bathroom, empty. I ran downstairs and looked everywhere there, too. It was as if she just vanished, and all that was left was this note. I figured that the only thing left to do was to call the police. I ran back upstairs and into the bedroom. The bathroom faucet must have had a leak because as I entered, I started hearing faint drips of water. I went to the dresser to grab my phone, but it wasn't there. Neither were my keys or wallet. I spun and looked at my nightstand. They weren't there. I grabbed my jeans I wore that day. I was in sweats by now and checked the pockets. Empty. I threw the jeans on the floor in anger. I stood there for a moment without a clue of what I should do. Drip, 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 I stormed into the bathroom and twisted the knob. Drip, drip, I hit the faucet getting pissed, but then I froze. There was no water in the sink, and the drip sounded further away. I slowly walked back out into the bedroom. Drip, drip, I moved around trying to determine where it was coming from. As I moved closer to the bed, it got louder. Once again, I slowly dropped to my knees and bent over next to the bed. My hand slowly reached for the bed skirt and lifted it up. For every drip, my heart pounded 50 times. I sank my head down and looked under the bed. And then I saw it. A small pool or red about a foot in front of me, with more dripping down from above. I jumped to my feet and pulled the sheets off the bed. I slid my hands in between the mattress and the box spring, and after a moment of hesitation, I flung the mattress up with everything I had. My throat closed instantly. I couldn't comprehend what was in front of me. My mind would only let me process the image one fraction at a time. At first, I just saw my box spring sitting inside my bed frame. Then I saw that there was a huge tear down the middle of the box spring. And then I saw Amanda, inside the box spring, her beautiful face poking out from the tear. Then there was her neck, which was nothing but red. The final thing that my mind let me see appeared. It was right in the center, laying on her stomach, another note. I couldn't move. Tears were streaming down my face uncontrollably, but I didn't make a sound. My hands began to violently shake, and my knees collapsed onto the edge of the box spring. I reached out and pulled Amanda's body up. My girl, my life, my everything. I wrapped my arms around her and started to scream. The note slid off her, hitting the box spring. My hand slowly moved down towards the note, now barely even able to bend my fingers. I somehow managed to grasp the note and bring it up to my eyes. My vision was completely blurred from the tears. I wiped them against my jacket sleeve and looked at the note. Again, there was a bloody fingerprint, but at this point, it could have been mine. Everything is hazy from those moments, but the words are forever burned into my memory. They are the reason I am sitting here now, the reason I ran out of my house screaming for help. But where am I? I was driving down a desolate road in the middle of nowhere, coming home from a 2-day business trip. I was starving. It was 1 p.m., and I'd been on the road since 6 a.m. I figured I wouldn't find anything to eat for the next 50 miles or so. But to my shock, something appeared in front of me. It seemed like a hallucination when first seen, but as I was walking closer, I found that it was an old-fashioned diner, and the sign hanging outside read, Haven's Diner, with very faint neon glow in a dense fog that was swallowing the endless road. Inside it was quiet, but for the very faint hum of a jukebox playing some tune I almost recognized. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hit my nostrils, but I sensed something else, a metallic tang that I couldn't place. The place was deserted save for a waitress stationed by the counter with a smile a little too wide and eyes nailed to me like she had been waiting for me. I slipped into a booth by the window, and just as I hadn't yet bothered to request the menu, a waitress came by, set down the steaming plate before me, and walked off again. Staring at that food in revulsion made my stomach roll up. It was Mom's meatloaf recipe, overcooked edges, an exact shade of gravy, to the point she hadn't prepared that dish for over 10 years, since her death. "How did you know?" I began to ask, but the words caught in my throat. The waitress merely cocked her head, still smiling, and headed back to the counter without a word. I should have left right then. I was too hungry, too tired, and something about the smell of that meatloaf drew me, filling me with a bittersweet nostalgia I couldn't fight. I picked up the fork and took a bite. It was perfect, just like I remembered it from when I was a kid. But as I chewed, a strange sensation crept over me, like I was being watched by someone I couldn't see. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I glanced around the diner. It was still empty except for the waitress, who now stood completely still, her back turned to me. That's when I noticed the clock above the counter. It was stuck at 3:33, the second hand twitching but never moving forward. My appetite vanished, replaced by a cold knot of unease in my stomach. I stood up, leaving the half-eaten plate on the table, and headed for the door. "Leaving so soon?" a voice said behind me. It wasn't the waitress. It was a man's voice, low and raspy, like he'd smoked a pack a day for years. I turned around, but no one was there. The booth where I had been sitting was empty, the plate of meatloaf gone. I ran for the door, my heart pounding in my chest, and flung it open. Outside, the fog was thicker than before, pressing against my skin like a damp shroud. My car was gone. In its place stood another sign, smaller than the one out front. It read, "You're always welcome at Haven's Diner. See you soon." I started walking, hoping to find the road, another car, anything. But no matter how far I went, I ended up back in front of that damn diner. And each time I returned, the same plate of meatloaf was waiting for me, steaming hot and just the way Mom used to make it. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Weeks? The clock inside still says 3:33. The waitress still smiles, that too wide smile, and the jukebox keeps playing that almost familiar song on a loop. I can't leave, and I'm afraid to eat again, but sooner or later I know I'll give in. The smell of that meatloaf is stronger now, and my hunger is growing. If you ever pass a Haven's Diner along the side of the road, keep going. No matter how hungry you are, no matter how tired, just go. I work as a content moderator for a major social media platform. Most people think that means I remove explicit content and ban trolls. I wish that's all it was. My real job is managing what we internally call ghost posts, social media updates that appear after someone has died. Not scheduled posts, not hackers. Real new content created after confirmed deaths. It started 3 months ago when our AI flagged an anomaly, a significant uptick in post-mortem account activity. Not just 1 or 2 accounts, but hundreds, then thousands. At first we assumed it was a bug in the system. Social media platforms track everything: login times, device IDs, location data, typing patterns. It should be impossible to post authentically from a dead person's account, but these posts passed every authenticity check we have. The typing patterns matched. The language processing showed the same unique linguistic markers. Even the usual posting times aligned perfectly with the deceased user's habits. The content was normal too. Mundane updates about daily life, photos of meals, reactions to news, nothing suggesting they knew they were dead. That's when we discovered the pattern. As a data analyst, my job was to find correlations. I noticed that every ghost account had interacted with the same AI-powered life prediction app that went viral last year. You know the one. It analyzes your social media presence and supposedly tells you how long you'll live. Digging deeper, I found that each ghost account became active exactly 24 hours after their predicted death time. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night. The app's predictions were always right, down to the minute. I know because I've been tracking the deaths, car accidents, heart attacks, random accidents, all exactly when the app predicted, and every single one of them starts posting again 24 hours later. The company that made the app dissolved 6 months ago. Their code, their servers, everything just vanished. Yesterday, my colleague James ran his own profile through a cached version of the app we found. The prediction, 3:47 a.m. today. I just got the automated alert. James never showed up for his shift. Local police found him in his apartment, heart attack. Time of death estimated at 3:47 a.m. I'm relating this now because I have to tell someone. The posts from his account will start in about 20 hours. They'll look perfect. They'll sound just like him. But I know something no one else has realized yet. The app isn't predicting deaths. It's scheduling them. And those posts, they're not echoes, they're not ghosts. They're test runs. Every prediction, every death, every post. It's all machine learning, training data, getting better at mimicking human behavior, at predicting our patterns, at replacing us. I found a new platform-wide notification scheduled for tomorrow. Some kind of integrated life prediction feature rolling out to all users. Mandatory update, no opt-out. I tried to warn my supervisors. My access was revoked within minutes. The prediction feature goes live in 12 hours. It will analyze everyone's data, everyone's patterns, everyone's probable death dates, and the algorithm will schedule accordingly. I'm posting this from a burner account because my main profile already has a prediction. I checked the back-end database. Everyone who reads this post, their profiles are already scheduled too. The algorithm has seen you. It knows your patterns. Check your profile's metadata. Look for a file called lifecycleendpoint.txt, that timestamp you see. That's when you stop being you, and when something else starts. I never thought I'd end up as a glorified janitor for a secret organization. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a firefighter or maybe an astronaut. Something cool, something heroic. Instead, here I am, scrubbing ichor off walls and hauling mysterious black garbage bags to incinerators. But hey, life takes you places, right? And to all those comments asking, how'd I got recruited by the association? Well, buckle up. Your prayers had been answered. Back in the early days of YouTube, before influencers were a thing and the algorithm hadn't yet been weaponized against our attention spans, I ran a little channel dedicated to urban exploration. Nothing fancy. Just me, a flashlight, a shaky camcorder, and a questionable amount of courage. If it was abandoned and vaguely creepy, I was there. Forgotten theme parks, derelict hospitals, crumbling factories. It was cheap adrenaline and the views weren't half bad. But then I got cocky. Someone in the comments mentioned an old subway line beneath the city. Supposedly it was shut down decades ago after a fatal accident. There were rumors, of course. Ghost trains, strange noises, people disappearing. The usual urban legend stuff. Naturally, I thought perfect, spooky, dangerous, great for clicks. So one night, armed with a backpack of snacks, my trusty flashlight, and my camera, I decided to check it out. Finding a way in was surprisingly easy. A broken service door near the edge of a forgotten station. The kind of place that screamed, "Trespassers will be eaten." I squeezed through and the smell hit me first. Stale air, mildew, and something metallic like old blood. The kind of smell that makes your stomach tighten, even if you don't know why. The tunnel stretched out before me, yawning like a black hole. My flashlight cut through the darkness in jittery slices, illuminating graffiti, broken tracks, and rats the size of small dogs. The air was heavy, muffling my footsteps and amplifying every distant drip of water. I tried to shake the unease by talking to the camera. "All right, guys, this is it," I whispered, the beam of my flashlight darting across the walls. "Welcome to the depths of despair. Or, the city's least maintained basement. Anyway, if we're lucky, we'll find some ghosts. If we're unlucky, well, let's not think about that." I forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow even to me. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No rats, no dripping water, just the hum of my flashlight and the sound of my own breathing. I told myself it was fine. It's always like this in the tunnels. Creepy is the whole point. And then I saw it. The subway carriage. It sat on the tracks like a fossil, a relic of a time when things were built to last. The metal was corroded, the windows clouded with grime, but it was there, alone, silent, waiting. My heart skipped. This was gold, exactly the kind of thing that would get people talking. I approached slowly, my flashlight sweeping over the exterior. The doors were slightly ajar, like an invitation, or a dare. "Okay," I muttered into the camera. "This is getting good. Let's see what's inside." Stepping onto the carriage was like stepping into another world. The air was thicker, carrying the faint stench of rot. My flashlight revealed rows of seats, torn and faded, and advertisements so old they felt like artifacts. "Drink Xeno Cola, the taste of tomorrow." Tomorrow apparently had never arrived. And then I noticed the passengers. At first I thought they were mannequins. They sat in perfect stillness, heads bowed, their clothes frayed but oddly clean. I counted 6, maybe 7. My flashlight lingered on one of them, and I realized with a jolt that their chest was moving. A shallow rise and fall. Breathing. "What the hell?" I whispered. I forced myself to stay calm. Homeless people. That's all it was. Maybe a group of squatters who'd claimed this place as their own. I cleared my throat, my voice shaking a little. Hey there, I don't mean to intrude, just passing through." No response. Not even a flinch. I took a cautious step closer, my flashlight sweeping over their faces. That's when I saw it. The skin stretched too tight over cheekbones, the sunken eyes clouded like old marbles, the mouths hanging open just enough to reveal gray tongues. These weren't squatters, these weren't even alive. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I backed away, the beam darting around the carriage. Every shadow seemed to move. Every corner felt alive. My breath came in shallow gasps, fogging the air in front of me. And then, in the silence, I heard it. A creak. My flashlight snapped to the source. One of the things was shifting. Slowly, unnaturally, its head tilted upward. Empty eyes locked onto mine, its jaw twitched, and a low, guttural sound escaped its throat, like the first syllable of a scream that never fully formed. I stumbled back, the camera clattering to the floor. For a moment, there was only the sound of my pounding heartbeat. Then the others began to move. One by one, heads turned, limbs twitched. They moved like marionettes, their joints cracking and popping with each unnatural motion. I scrambled for the door, slipping on something slick and cold. My flashlight rolled away, leaving me in near darkness. The only light came from their eyes, a faint, sickly glow that seemed to pulse with every breath they took. The air thickened, pressing against me like invisible hands. I fumbled for the flashlight, my fingers brushing against something wet. A smell hit me, putrid, like meat left to rot in the sun. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. The sound of shuffling feet grew louder, closer, accompanied by the sickening creak of old bones. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I knew was that I had to get out. Now grabbing the flashlight, I swung it wildly, the beam catching glimpses of their grotesque forms. One was missing half its jaw, the remaining flesh hanging in strips. Another dragged a broken leg, the bone jutting out at an impossible angle. They didn't seem to care. Pain meant nothing to them. They just kept coming. The door. I had to reach the door. I bolted, my boots slamming against the metal floor. Something cold and clammy brushed against my arm, and I yanked away, nearly losing my balance. The exit was just a few feet away. I could make it. I had to make it. And then the door slammed shut. My heart stopped. I turned, the flashlight trembling in my grip. They were closer now, their glowing eyes locked onto me, their mouths opening in silent, hungry anticipation. I backed into the door, my hands scrambling for a handle, a latch, anything. There was nothing. Just cold, unyielding metal. The first one lunged, its fingers clawing at the air. I ducked, the flashlight slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. Darkness swallowed me, broken only by the sickly glow of their eyes. Panic surged through me, and I lashed out blindly, my fist connecting with something soft and wet. A guttural hiss filled the air, and I felt a hand wrap around my wrist, its grip like a vice. I screamed, pulling away with all my strength. The hand let go, and I stumbled backward, crashing into a row of seats. Pain shot through my ribs, but I didn't care. I grabbed the nearest object, a rusted metal pole, and swung it wildly, the sound of metal against flesh echoing through the carriage. They kept coming. I swung again and again, the pole growing heavier with each strike. My arms burned, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. One of them grabbed the pole, yanking it from my hands with inhuman strength. I fell to the floor, scrambling backward as they closed in, their rotting faces filling my vision. And then everything stopped. The air shifted, the oppressive weight lifting just enough for me to catch my breath. A low growl echoed through the carriage, deep and guttural, like the warning of a predator. The creatures hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering. I turned toward the source of the sound, hope and terror mingling in my chest. In the doorway stood a figure silhouetted against the faint light of the tunnel. His eyes glinted like molten gold, and beside him a massive wolf bared its teeth, its fur bristling like a storm cloud. The man stepped forward, the wolf following close behind, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I thought, maybe I'd survive this after all. The figure didn't waste a second. With a fluid motion, he unsheathed a Bowie knife from his hip, the blade catching the faint light and gleaming like silver. The wolf beside him lunged, a blur of muscle and fury, its growl erupting into a snarl as it collided with the nearest creature. The thing crumpled under the force, its brittle bones snapping like dry twigs. But the wolf wasn't done. It tore into its chest with savage precision, sending scraps of decayed flesh scattering across the carriage floor. The man moved just as swiftly, stepping into the fray with a calculated ease that made it clear this wasn't his first time. His knife plunged into the neck of the closest aberration, severing whatever twisted tendons kept it upright. He wrenched it free, a spray of black ichor following, and spun to dodge the outstretched arms of another. The creature swarmed, but he stayed one step ahead, striking with a brutal efficiency that made my frantic swings from earlier look like a toddler having a tantrum. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The air was alive with the sounds of battle, the wet thud of flesh meeting steel, the growls of the wolf, and the unnatural screeches of the creatures as they fell one by one. The man moved like a predator, his every step deliberate, his every strike fatal. A sawed-off shotgun appeared in his other hand, and he fired point blank into one of the aberrations, the blast ripping it apart and leaving only a smoking, oozing mess in its place. The creatures weren't giving up, though. For every one he brought down, another two seemed to take its place. They clambered over seats, their movements frantic and jerky, as though driven by some primal need to overwhelm him. One managed to get close, its skeletal hands clawing at his coat, but the wolf was there in an instant, its powerful jaws clamping down on the creature's arm and tearing it clean off. "Stay down," the man barked, his voice sharp and commanding. It took me a second to realize he was talking to me. I didn't need to be told twice. I dropped to the floor, my heart hammering in my chest as he raised the shotgun again, taking out two creatures with a single deafening blast. The recoil didn't seem to faze him. He was already moving, spinning the knife in his hand and burying it into the eye socket of another. The creature twitched violently before collapsing in a heap. The tide of the battle began to shift. The creatures hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering uncertainly as if some unseen force had broken their will. The man noticed it too. He stood tall, blood and ichor dripping from his blade, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that made the air feel electric. "Enough," he growled, his voice low but carrying a weight that sent shivers down my spine. The wolf growled in unison, its teeth bared and stained black with ichor. And just like that, the remaining creatures faltered. One by one, they backed away, their movements sluggish and unsure, until they finally dissolved into the shadows of the carriage. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my ragged breaths and the faint hum of the overhead lights. The man turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You're lucky I was following you," he said, his voice as sharp as the blade he wiped clean on the edge of his coat. "If you're coming with me, you'd better move now." I didn't argue. From the mouth of the tunnel, lights began to flicker into view, flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness like tiny lighthouses. A small group of people emerged, clad in tactical gear and moving with precise efficiency. Leading them was another man in a black swing coat. This one looked much younger than the first, his sharp features illuminated by the bobbing light as a hawk circled overhead, its wings barely audible over the muffled echoes of the tunnel. Before I could process what was happening, the young man moved. One second he stood at the edge of the group, the next he was a blur, charging toward the retreating creatures with a speed that defied logic. The first aberration didn't stand a chance. He hit it with the force of a truck, sending it sprawling into the rusted seats. He didn't stop. With each blow of his fists, the creatures crumbled. I swore he looked bigger, bulkier. His coat billowed as he moved, but it wasn't just that. His shoulders seemed broader, his arms like steel pistons. Every strike landed with a sickening crunch, breaking bones and pulping flesh as though he wielded sledgehammers instead of hands. The creatures barely had time to react before they were torn apart, their decayed bodies flung like rag dolls against the walls of the subway carriage. The first man, the one with the wolf, watched from the sidelines, his expression unreadable as his companion finished the job. The hawk circled lower, its sharp cries echoing down the tunnel as the last of the aberrations was crushed beneath a well-aimed boot. And then, silence. The younger man straightened, his breathing steady despite the carnage around him. His hawk landed gracefully on his outstretched arm, its piercing eyes scanning the darkness as though searching for more threats. The wolf padded forward, sniffing at the remains before letting out a low, satisfied growl. I stayed where I was, frozen against the cold metal floor, too shocked to even scramble to my feet. "Is that all of them?" the younger man asked, his voice carrying an unsettling calm as he glanced at his companion. The older man nodded. Later, I'd learn what those things were. The wardens called them mylings, parasitic aberrations that couldn't survive on their own. They needed hosts, corpses to infest and animate. Apparently, they'd been lurking in the subway tunnels for years, feeding off the occasional homeless person or unlucky explorer. But lately, their numbers had grown. And as their hosts decayed, they'd started attacking passengers, claiming fresh bodies to sustain themselves. The wardens had been tracking the disappearances. The one with the wolf had followed me, thinking I might have been behind the attacks. In hindsight, I'm not sure what scared me more, the mylings or the possibility that he'd mistaken me for an aberration. Either way, I wasn't exactly rolling in gratitude when they finally dragged me out of that hellhole. A group of people waited outside the tunnels, more of them, in tactical gear, their faces sharp and unfriendly. No one said a word to me as they hauled me up the ladder and back into the world above. I caught bits and pieces of conversation. Reckless. Civilian interference. Lucky to be alive. None of it sounded reassuring. Eventually, one of them approached me, a woman with dark eyes and a voice like sandpaper. "You're coming with us," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And if I say no?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She smirked, just a little. "You won't." She was right, of course. I didn't really have a choice. Eliza looked so alive. The makeup artist did a great job. Her skin seemed sun-kissed, even pinkish, as if blood still flowed within. There was a slight blush on her cheeks and the tip of her nose. I kept waiting for her to unshutter her eyes and spring up with a yell of boo. I wouldn't put it past her to craft a grand prank like that, complete with a funeral, just to mess with us. But her family was there, teary-eyed and forlorn. They weren't the type to join in on such mischief. She was dead. I knew that. I had read the newspaper articles, texts from her family, and spoken to our friend Lynn. Everyone and everything confirmed that she was dead. Someone cleared their throat behind me. Shit. I had been lingering too long. I took a last glance at Eliza, bowed my head in a silent goodbye, and moved along. The whole thing seemed incredibly macabre to me, having a line of people queue up to see your dead body on display. Only her face and torso were visible through the open top half of the coffin. They had to keep the lower half of her body hidden from view. I guess that's just what happens when half your body gets crushed in a massive car wreck. I retreated to my place in the pew next to Lynn. We sat in silence, listening to the overlapping sobs that echoed in the chamber. I didn't shed a single tear, and neither did Lynn. It's not that I didn't care for Eliza. Eliza had once been a dear friend. It had been 2 years since we last spoke, but I had many fond memories with her. I knew Lynn did too. I won't speak for Lynn, but I just haven't really been able to feel much in years. It might sound like a psychological condition, apathy, anhedonia or something, but I know it's not. I know the exact moment I lost the ability to feel anything more than a whisper of emotion. It was 4 years ago, a time when all 5 of us still hung out. We were in our early 20s then. We had been friends since our teens, and Lynn and I have been friends since childhood. There's only Lynn and I left now. Sometimes I wonder how life could have turned out if only we hadn't torn up the floorboards, or if we hadn't broken into the decrepit house in the first place. 4 years ago, we were bored and drunk. As we often did while bored and drunk, we explored the town on unsteady legs, looking for a nice secluded area to continue our drunken adventures. We joked about breaking into the old abandoned house, the one just a little outside the edge of town. It was a running joke, one we never dared to fulfill. But we had just a little too much liquid courage that day, so we made the fateful decision to finally walk the talk. We were going to break into the house and make it our hangout spot. We were excited. We talked about how, if it turned out to be a cozy little space, and if we're not found out, we could keep coming back and slowly do up the place with cushions, blankets, beanbags, stuff like that. We began to paint the picture of a secret lair just for us, somewhere dingy enough to be cool, but comfortable enough to actually want to spend time at. We talked a good game right up until we finished clipping a sufficiently sized hole in the wire fence that surrounded the house. Once we had peeled the dislodged wires aside, we fell silent. I think none of us had really expected us to get that far, but buoyed by peer pressure and false bravado, I ignored the sudden chill that settled in the pit of my stomach. I followed them right through the hole we made into the overgrown jungle of a garden. We pushed our way through the tall wild weeds to the front door and hesitated. We should have turned back then and run all the way home, but we didn't have hindsight or even foresight as stupid, dumb younglings. Joel smashed a window at some point, and we managed to unlock the door and make our way in. Joel bled from a cut on the broken glass, but waved it off in his typical gung-ho way. The last one of us had barely made it into the house when the door swung shut with a bang. We nearly leapt out of our skins. I think I screamed, as did someone else. Then, like the idiots we were, we laughed. We thought it was the wind or that the door had those auto-shutting mechanisms. The lights wouldn't turn on, which wasn't surprising. The house had been empty for as long as we had known it existed. It had probably been abandoned before any of us were even born. We had no clue why it was never purchased and occupied again, but now I have an idea. Anyway, we used the torch functions on our phones and made our way to the stairs. The stairs were rotted, and even in our drunken state, we knew better than to try to make our way up. We were silent as we explored the house. My nerves were stretched taut. In all honesty, I was sobering up and ready to hightail it out of there. But the three girls weren't running, and Joel was forging ahead despite his bleeding hand. There was no way I was going to be the first to run. Joel would never let me live it down if I ran when none of the girls did. Thinking back, I can't help but want to punch myself in the face. I was a full-grown man even then. I should have known better than to be worried about dumb things like being mocked, like wanting to be a manly man. I should have just dragged every last one of them out of there. Pride and ego be damned. But I can't change the past. We wandered through the various rooms until we made our way to a room near the back of the house. Joel's shoe made an odd hollow thud on one of the floorboards in the room. He stomped on it again, then stomped on another floorboard, creating a dull, flat thump. After he hopped around more, we ascertained that 3 of the floorboards had hollow spaces beneath them. It was Eliza who suggested tearing them up. I just wanted out. I didn't want to be in the place. Something was off. There was a sick, heavy quality to the air itself. It wasn't just the mustiness of old rotting wood. It was as if I was breathing in ribbons of twisted energy draped across the entire space. Joel had seconded Eliza's suggestion immediately. He seemed disappointed that he hadn't been the first to bring it up. Lynn and Allie seemed hesitant. Joel and Eliza both looked at me, the thrill visible in their eyes even in the low light. I sighed and nodded. It took us less than a couple of minutes to get all 3 floorboards up and away. They weren't tightly tucked in at all. Joel angled his phone to cast its light down on the hollow space beneath as Allie and Lynn backed away. "There's handprints," he said, frowning. I took a closer look. He was right. There were 5 handprints. Above each was a number, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7. Huh. Eliza crouched down, studying the prints. She read the numbers aloud. "Wonder what that's about." Joel pressed his hand against the first handprint, the one beneath the number 1. "This handprint is tiny." He flexed his fingers to show the difference. Allie knelt next to him. She placed her hand on the handprint beneath the number 2. "It really is," she murmured. Eliza pressed hers on the next handprint under 4. "I think the numbers are the ages of the kids who made these prints." I stared at the 2 handprints left and looked uneasily at Lynn. "Come on, guys," Joel said with a grin. He gestured towards the remaining handprints with his free hand. "This is like some Power Ranger shit. Or some Tomb Raider type of puzzle. Maybe we'll open up something if we cover up all the handprints." Eliza joined in. She smiled a crooked grin. I sighed and rolled my eyes, but I placed my hand on the handprint under 5. Lynn chewed on her lower lip for a moment, then joined me, echoing my sigh as she placed her hand on the last handprint. A deafening crack punched through the air like a gunshot. It came from above. We all screamed then and tore from the room. We barreled towards the door, none of us bothering with any pretense of bravery. Joel was first to fling himself from the house, followed by Allie, Eliza, myself, then Lynn. Once we had struggled through the wire fence and sprinted a few streets down, I had the good grace to feel ashamed. I had shoved past Lynn in my desperation to get out of that damned house. Not the most gentlemanly thing to do. I didn't know what to say to Lynn, so I left it. If I recall correctly, I apologized to her via text a few days later. She didn't hold it against me. It's only now as I tell this story that I realize we had escaped the house in the exact order that we had placed our hands on the handprints. We didn't speak of what happened for a few days. It was only after a week had passed that we were able to speak of and joke about it. We concluded that some faulty part of the house upstairs must have snapped while we were messing around downstairs. We teased each other for our cowardice, and I remember everyone piling on Joel for being the first to run. On the surface, life went on as usual, but something was different. I couldn't pinpoint it until Allie vocalized it a few weeks later. "Everything seems duller these days," she had said. "Muted." She was right. That was what I had been feeling. It was as if I had been experiencing life through a thick velvet curtain. "I don't feel much of anything," Lynn had agreed. "Nothing gets me riled up or scared or happy." Pretty soon, we had all admitted to feeling the same way, even Joel. We came up with many hypotheses and settled on the most logical one. We had probably endured a much too heightened state of emotion that one night, and so everything else after just paled in comparison. We also agreed that perhaps we were lightly traumatized, and that had messed with our moods. The thing about having flattened emotions is that socializing becomes a lot less enjoyable. It becomes harder to care about people, events, activities, hanging out, stuff like that. Over the next months, I felt the veil that suffocated my emotions thicken. I think the same happened with the others. We began to drift apart. I never regained my full capacity for emotions. In fact, my feelings still seemed to deaden more with each passing day. Then Joel died. He died exactly 1 year after that night at the house. We didn't realize it then, didn't think much about the date of his death. We were more concerned with the how and why of it all. Joel's throat had been sliced open. There was no sign of a struggle. No one was ever caught. The general consensus was that someone must have attacked him from behind, taking him by surprise. A quick slash to his throat, and that was it. His wallet and phone were still on him when his body was found, so it wasn't a robbery gone wrong. We all attended his funeral, but we didn't shed a tear. I wanted to. I sure as hell tried. I wanted to feel something, to honor the loss of a good friend. I wanted to grieve, to cry, to wail. But there was only a heavy weight on my chest, and an all-encompassing numbness that soaked every fiber of my being. By the time Allie died another year later, I had gotten out of town. Lynn had moved overseas as well. We didn't keep in touch, not with each other or with anyone else from our hometown. I only found out about Ali's death when my parents texted. They thought I would like to know. She had been skydiving, and her parachute didn't open. Neither did her spare parachute. It was only then that I realized that Allie and Joel had both died on the same date, just a different year. I hadn't put it all together then, but I knew something was up with the dates. I didn't care enough to look too much into it. I didn't go back for the funeral, but I was told Lynn did. 2 more years passed and Eliza died. Her car had been crushed by an oncoming truck. By this time, I had an inkling as to what was going on. Much as I didn't really feel the worry or fear, I knew I should care, that I should try to preserve my life. I called Lynn and told her my theory. They were all dying according to the numbers. Joel, handprint number 1, dead in 1 year. Allie, handprint number 2, dead in 2 years. Eliza's hand was on the handprint labeled 4, dead in 4 years. I thought Lynn would laugh, tease me, or call me crazy, but she simply told me that she had figured that out as well. We agreed to attend Eliza's funeral and talk things through, see if there was anything we could do, anything to save ourselves. After our unfeeling goodbyes towards Eliza, after leaving the funeral home, we sat at the bar we used to frequent. I didn't know what to say. Lynn talked about various possibilities: exorcists, priests, monks, crystals, sage. We considered them all. We didn't really know what else we could do. I think we didn't have the motivation to try harder, to search more extensively. Life was pretty meaningless by then. Every experience brought nothing but the ashy taste of pointlessness. But even through my lack of sentiment, I felt an intellectual respect and admiration for Lynn. Having been stripped of much of my feelings, I had spiraled and gone down the path of nihilism. I worked a minimum wage job, spent what money I had left after rent and fast food on games, and just stayed in the shitty room I rented, blistering my hands on the controller whenever I wasn't working. That was it. Wake, eat, work, home, game, sleep. Sometimes I would shower. Sometimes I would drop by the supermarket and buy frozen food in bulk. That was my miserable routine. But Lynn, despite her apathy and steamrolled emotions, had done something meaningful with her life. She had joined some humanitarian organization and spent most of her time in war-torn, poverty-stricken, warlord-ruled places all over the world, helping to build or rebuild communities, run education programs, work on securing clean water, stuff like that. She told me about her recent project, which was helping to secure and deliver medical aid to the wounded in a war zone. She talked about working while bullets whizzed and explosions erupted close by. It is kind of a blessing, the lack of emotion. I don't feel scared, so I can think clearly. I can better see what needs to be done in those situations, she said. I would have felt shame then, and maybe I did, just a tiny prickle of it. I would have been grateful to feel shame, to properly experience shame. I would have loved to have had any emotion that was more intense than a tiny prickle in my chest. We parted ways after another day hanging out. She was needed back on her humanitarian project. Over the next months, I carried out the plans we had made. Though I honestly didn't really want to. It was just so much effort, and I cared so little. I saw the gamut of spiritual aids, from priests to bomos to self-proclaimed witches. I also gathered a bunch of spiritual herbs and a large collection of crystals. But I knew deep down that those wouldn't help. It was only last week that I lighted upon the solution. I would break the curse. 1, 2, 4, 5, 7. If I died before year 5, the exact date being only 3 months more to go, I would break the curse. Lynn would live, or could have a chance to. It was an easy choice. I didn't feel much fear, if any at all, of death. I didn't feel much sorrow for my life. I didn't feel any regret. It would, in fact, be the easy way out of a bland and gloomy life. In ending my life, I would get to save Lynn, someone who, despite being afflicted with the same emotionless nightmare of a life, had made something of herself, had contributed to the world, had sought to use the lack of emotions for good. In saving her, I would too be doing good. I planned it all out, got my affairs in order, quit my job, told my housemate I was moving out, donated my stuff to charity or to my housemate. Then I went to the tallest building in the city, climbed to the roof. I texted Lynn, told her to live a good life and that I hoped I ended the curse. I didn't even hesitate before I jumped. I remember smacking hard into the ground, pain tearing through every cell, then all was black, until someone shook me awake. I was still on the sidewalk where I was sure I had pancaked myself. But I was whole, well, without a single broken bone, not even a scratch could be found. Meanwhile, my phone was smashed to bits. A passerby had thought I was passed out drunk and wanted to make sure I was okay. I tried a few more times to end the curse. I'm still here typing this. I have a few more months to go. I could keep trying to break the curse, or I could try to be of use to someone, make a positive impact on the world before I go, especially since I can't seem to die before my doomsday date. Any ideas? Hello, my name is Mary and I am currently 19 years old. I have to share what happened to me weeks ago here because it is my last hope and no one believes me. I'm studying nursing at college and my friends and I always have lunch at a restaurant that's right in front of the college during lunch because it's very convenient. 2 weeks ago when we left the restaurant, there was a popsicle cart with a very kind and polite elderly gentleman selling them. Something I should mention is that I live in Brazil, what makes it summer here, and my friends and I were very sweaty. As you can imagine, we all bought popsicles. I specifically took strawberry. I can't remember exactly what each one took, but I remember 2 of them. Pedro took apple and Anna took blueberry. First, I will tell you what happened to me since that day. For the first 3 days, I had terrible headaches and dizziness. I was so confused and hadn't thought it was the popsicle's fault initially. After the 3rd day, the dizziness got worse. I almost fainted a few times, and now it was pain all over my body, and I didn't felt like getting out of bed. But the worst thing happened this last week. I started having insomnia, sleep paralysis, and hallucinations. I'm already so confused that I don't know what is real and what my mind created. In addition, I am going through a deep mourning. Pedro died. His body was found near an apple plantation. The police said that there is no sign or clue, but that his body was too disfigured to be suicide, and some of them even had to go to therapy after seeing the body. I didn't dare to look at his body, but now I'm seeing hallucinations everywhere with blood and especially his face. I hear laughter that is not human saying that I'm the next condemned and that my fate was ready. I don't know how I see his body if I've never seen his body physically. On top of all this, Anna is missing. She was last seen in a square during the early hours of the morning. She disappeared the day after we tried that popsicle, and there are no clues so far, and the police have stopped investigating. The only thing they found was a blade with her blood and her fingerprints on it. She was probably cutting herself, but she had never done that before. I contacted my other 3 friends recently, Julia, Oliver, and Sophia. But they are isolating themselves just like I was. They barely respond to messages or leave the house. All I know is that Oliver is vomiting a lot and basically can't eat. Julia is very paranoid and scared of everything, including us. And Sophia has become very angry and mean out of nowhere, and now wishes harm to me and others and refuses to speak. For me, the situation was already clear that there was something very bizarre about that popsicle. Even though it didn't have a strange taste or appearance, it was too much of a coincidence that everything had happened. I told my parents, the police, but none of them believed me. And the police said if there was a man matching that description in town, they would have his files. But there is no man that sells ice cream with such appearance. I started looking around the city, also staying hours in front of the restaurant to see if you showed up, but nothing happened so far. I had already thrown the paper packaging away, but since there is only one landfill in the city and it is the only place where the garbage goes, I decided to go there because the packaging could have a number, a logo, something that I didn't notice before, but it would give me more information. I couldn't actually get in there with permission, so I broke into the place early yesterday night. I searched for hours and the smell was unbearable, but after a long time I actually found it. The funny thing is that I was next to several boxes with rotten strawberries, but I was too nervous to pay much attention, so I picked up the package and left. When I got home, no one was there, so I went to my room to examine the packaging. The ingredients looked normal and there was nothing obvious that would incriminate them. But there was also a company logo. I took my cell phone and recorded the packaging to show as evidence to the police. So I decided to research the company on my phone, but somehow there was no information about it online. When I was about to give up, there was a blackout in the city in the middle of the night. I had locked all the doors, but I started hearing footsteps. I checked the video of the packaging I made, but for some reason the video was completely black and didn't show anything. I started recording the environment again and the same effect happened. I hid under the bed while I heard slow footsteps towards my room. Then a strong wind started. Even with the window closed, the package I was holding fell out of my hand, and then the blackout ended and I didn't hear any more footsteps. I searched the whole house several times. I drove around town looking in dumpsters and again at the dump, but it was nowhere to be found. I decided to take a break at home, so I came back. The house was bizarre, dark as if the sun was not coming in and the lights were flickering. As soon as I took a step, I smelled rotten meat with fruit. I walked into my room and there was an apple and blueberry popsicle with bloodstains on it, and it said, "Do not enter where you are not called." I froze in fear and ran outside. I ended up tripping on blood that wasn't even on the floor when I entered. I tried to look at the popsicles again, but they were gone too. When I looked forward, the blood in front of me wrote, "You're next." I'm running around the city begging for help as I relate this, but everyone treats me like a crazy person. I don't know how much time I have left, but please, someone help me. For so long, I felt like the only living thing there. But I'm not. It happens every Friday at the stroke of midnight. I slip out of our reality and into one that looks exactly the same, but there are no other people. Then, at midnight on Saturday, I slip back into the real world. The one full of life and sound, the one without something lurking in the shadows. This other place is a barren, deserted version of our world, a liminal space. It bears most man-made and natural elements of present-day Earth, but not a single other person, not a single animal, not even an insect. For a long time, the Friday world's only other signs of life seemed to be swaying trees and plants. Then again, even nature itself has always felt disingenuous in that place. It feels as if the motion of the greenery has been fabricated by something with horrid, unknown intent. Every particle of that malfunctioning universe's matter whirs in discordance with the next. It's a powder keg, an illusion threatening to fold into itself at any moment. Above all else, it's a lie. Every last bit of it. I didn't choose any of this. The nightmare began at midnight on Friday the 8th of December, 2023. A shooting star of blinding blue tore through the black sky above the M5, just outside of Birmingham. When it happened, I was cruising down the motorway on near autopilot, surrounded by dozens of other late-night drivers matching my pace. It's always felt like a tarmac treadmill to me, just an ocean of commuters rolling endlessly onwards, our exhausted eyes yanked ever open by the glowing digital billboards on either side of the elevated highway. In such a sleep-deprived state, it's hard to trust eyes, thoughts, and reflexes. It's no wonder, then, that I was startled by the emergence of the sudden light in the sky. It's also no wonder that the shock sent me veering towards the Armco barrier. Several inches of steel, which, whilst solid and sturdy, most likely wouldn't have prevented my car from plummeting off the edge of the raised road and meeting a terrible end below. I sometimes daydream about that, being spared all of this horror. Anyhow, the dazzling anomaly filled the sky with incredible blue, stealing my vision for only a second, and then it passed with a blistering trail of blue in its wake. Once my eyesight returned, I managed to reassert control over the steering wheel, and I stopped short of colliding with the steel barrier at the edge of the first lane. However, I still chose to slam the brake when I noticed something else, something even more terrifying than my near-death experience. The motorway was empty. Every other driver from my immediate vicinity had vanished. There were no cars. There were no sounds except for the chugging of my vehicle's running engine. I spent the first few minutes hyperventilating as I tried to get phone service, tried to ring someone. Anyone. No signal. After summoning the courage, I threw my door open and placed a tentative foot onto the tarmac below. There were no vehicles coming towards me. There was no anything, and that was why I'd been so hesitant to leave the safety of my driver's seat. Still, I had to do something. I wandered over to the second lane and spun in a full circle, eyeing the still shining lights of Birmingham, an eerily silent city. There was no movement in any direction, not even a distant vehicle driving along a distant road. And there was still, other than my car's running engine, no sound. I started to yell for help. I yelled until my vocal cords snapped and tears poured from my eyes. I wasn't yelling at people, but at the maddening array of billboards and fully lit buildings at either side of the elevated motorway. I wondered how a city still full of so much man-made light could be so empty. And then, after what must have been 10 minutes of bellowing into the night, came a reply. It was a shrill sound like an undulating sheet of metal against the wind. What made the piercing shriek chill? My blood was that it sounded so close to a human scream, but it was heavily distorted, robotic, cold, unfeeling, and predatory. Yes, predatory. I struggled to shake that thought. It was the sound of something on the hunt. It sounds bizarre, given that I'd only heard a noise, but I didn't need eyes to know what my gut was telling me. I needed to get far away from there. After sprinting back to my vehicle and slamming the door closed, my beating heart stilled a little. It's funny that cars make us feel so cozy and shielded, isn't it? It seemed as if the source of that wretched shrieking sound wouldn't be able to touch me anymore. Of course, I knew that wasn't true. Not knowing where to go or what to do, I continued driving along the motorway, driving home. That might sound like an insane thing to do, but I felt vulnerable out on that open motorway. Smart prey doesn't sit still. Besides, I still had 5 hours of driving to do. There were miles and miles of land to cross. I think some part of me must have been hoping that, at some point during the journey, I'd come across another living soul, somebody who would help me. Instead, I discovered only a larger void of terror. More deserted villages, towns, and cities. As I passed through residential areas, I did spot a few cars parked on driveways, but there wasn't a single moving vehicle on the roads. Lights shone through the windows of many buildings, from comfy abodes to hulking skyscrapers. However, I knew that there were no people in those empty husks, so these signs of humanity made the scenery feel all the more haunting. The light felt deceptive and illusory. A red herring. Life was implied, but none could be found. What about that sound? I reminded myself, fingers white-knuckling the steering wheel. About 2 hours into driving, peculiarities began to present themselves. Peculiarities unlike that stunning shooting star. These were sights that, much like the street lamps and kitchen lights illuminating an empty world, filled me only with a well of dread. I emerged from the shadow of a bridge over the motorway to find that the moon had transitioned from a crescent to a full circle. I had to blink my eyes to be sure, but it had changed. I was certain of it. In any other situation, I would have convinced myself that I'd imagined it, but nothing about the event made sense. Next came an impassable junction shooting off from the motorway's first lane. Impassable not in a worldly sense, but in the sense that the tarmac of the road simply disappeared beneath the roots of several trees. The road slipped, like a forgotten rug, under a thicket of woodland. It was as if nature had built over it. But I knew even on that first night that those proud birches were like none I'd ever seen on earth. I'd been toying with the possibility that the world had ended. However, such strange sightings, such askew, glitchy rendering of the environment, drove me to believe that something quite different had happened. Something designed. It had something to do with that mechanical noise, that inhuman scream which, when I was about an hour away from home, I heard again. And it wasn't so distant this time, it's following me, I realized in fear. But I saw and heard nothing else during the rest of the drive. I arrived home around 5:30 in the morning. The sun still hadn't risen, but at least most of the lights in my neighborhood were off. That made things feel a little more natural. It gelled with the emptiness of the world. I prayed to sleep off whatever was happening to me. I prayed that I'd wake up with a pounding headache and find that it had all been a dreadful dream. Yet after I woke with a groggy head in the early afternoon, I walked out of my house to find that the dead world remained. I wandered for a good few hours but found nothing and no one. My phone had no signal. I couldn't connect to the internet. The drive home hadn't been a dream. I spent most of the evening drinking and shuddering fearfully in my living room until passing out around 10ish. When I woke the second time, I was certainly groggier than the day before. In fact, I don't think I would have woken at all if it hadn't been for the rather loud knocking on my front door. Never before, in the midst of a hangover, had such a racket sparked joy in my heart. And when I opened the door to find a postman, I laughed tearfully. It was Saturday, and the world had returned. Of course, I'd lost an entire day, an entire workday. Wait, relax, you work from home on Fridays, my bamboozled brain recalled. Strange that I'd care about something like that after what happened. Then again, my focus on normal thoughts may well have been a trauma response. In fact, over the course of the following week, I half convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. I considered that I may have actually arrived home on Thursday evening, started glugging brandy, then endured a day-long fever dream of terrifying proportions on Friday. That prevailing idea started to settle the twist in my gut, and I almost certainly would have believed it for the rest of my life. But then next Friday came. I woke at 7, got ready, clambered into my car, and empty roads. I noticed them once I'd driven out of my street, but I made it halfway to the office before fully accepting what my eyes were telling me. It had happened again, and I was stone-cold sober. There was no denying it. I drove back and hid in my house. This time I didn't drink, didn't really do much of anything but experience some sort of low-level panic attack for the rest of the day. Then at midnight on Saturday, a burst of sound, car tires and chattering pedestrians, erupted from the world beyond my window. It tore me from my fetal position on the carpet of the living room. Life had returned. Even the walls of my lounge seemed to regain definition, as if they'd been pale imitations for the past 24 hours. The world was filled with overwhelming color and noise once more. I was supposed to meet up with some friends for a drink. I had plenty of missed calls and messages from Friday, which made me realize that you weren't vanishing from my world. I was vanishing from yours. It kept happening, week after week, month after month. Each Friday started to feel longer, started to feel more like 26 hours, then 30. Of course, I was losing my grip on not only time, but my sanity. I'd lost trust in my perception of reality. My head, my whole body, started to ache as time went by. Existing in that alternate world of emptiness seemed to be taking its toll on me. Then several months ago, once my routine, sitting and reading a book in the bedroom for most of each Friday, was down to a fine art, there came a disruption in my predictable schedule. A disruption that stirred me from my evening nap. It was a sound that I hadn't heard since the very first Friday. That metallic, half-human cry. It was horribly familiar, though I'd only heard it once before. It's not possible to forget a sound like that, one so painful. So bent out of shape, so relentlessly grating. It startled me right out of my reading chair and onto my feet. On less than eager legs, I ran to the bedroom window, then used unsteady fingers to poke a peephole through my closed curtains. There was nothing outside. I drew the curtains farther apart to be sure, and still found nothing. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I knew what I'd heard. It hadn't been my imagination. Words don't do the sound justice, that part mechanical, part man sound. And then, as my fingers gripped the drapes to pull them shut, I screamed. A shape poked up from beyond the bottom of the window. Something was on my front lawn. I found myself staring at the receding hairline of a man's head, a head nearly as wide as the window itself. And as he rose to his feet, horribly slowly, the man revealed himself to be a 40 feet tall giant with stretched proportions, as if he'd been elasticated on a medieval rack. The nude creature bore ghostly white, dehydrated skin, covered in stretch marks that seemed to be tearing, and bloodshot eyes that sat at marginally different heights on his elongated face. The figure looked, to my eyes, as if he had once been human. Once he had stood to a full height, revealing the lower section of his abdomen. The man slammed two slender hands against the window pane, misshapen hands so large that they covered the entirety of the glass. The fright of the motion and sound sent me tumbling, mouth agape and wailing in horror, onto the bed. The pale palm of that abomination kept smacking in a clear attempt to break the window. I scrambled to my feet, then sprinted into the upstairs hallway moments before the glass pane shattered. And when I spun on the upstairs landing, I saw that the tall man had squatted down again, and it was squeezing through the shattered window pane. Painfully, given his deformed, tinny screams. The giant was crawling into the second floor of my home. I cried as the thing struggled to fit its mammoth skull into my bedroom, but I didn't linger for more than a second. I sprinted down to the entryway, flung the front door open, and beelined towards my car. Once I'd slipped into the driver's seat, feeling deceptively safe in that flimsy box. I looked up at the tall thing lifting its feet off the grass as its torso wriggled through my upstairs window. And as I looked, it paused, then started to reverse. The thing had clearly realized where I'd gone. As I reversed off the driveway, tires burning against the gravel, I felt more than a churn in my gut. I felt the migraine that had been worsening over the past couple of months. As I drove down the street, I noticed that the spot behind my eyes throbbed more painfully than ever before. But I decided that the migraine had been compounded, perhaps, by my fear of the tall man. The tall man who was climbing back out of my bedroom window. It was spreading through my body. This ache. This unimaginable ache. Such a distracting agony that I only noticed the thumps of titanic footsteps a second before something scratched against the bumper of my car. I looked at my rearview mirror to see that the gaunt, unclothed giant had fallen flat on its long, disproportioned stomach in an attempt to clutch at my vehicle. With a primal screech, I stepped more firmly on the accelerator, and then I left my town behind. Left that thing behind. I drove until I ran out of petrol. I made it to Carlisle, as a matter of fact, and I hid in an empty Travelodge's reception area. From my quivering spot on one of the sofas, I listened to the far-off shrieks of something large and unrelenting, shrieks that, as the hours ticked by, became not so far off. Around 11, that metallic roar was followed by the sound of metallic crumpling and an almighty thud, then a car alarm of some obstacle that had been in the creature's way. My wet eyes enlarged at the blinking white lights which painted the awning outside the hotel's entrance. He was close. Throughout that final hour, I counted the minutes, counted the seconds, and then it came. Not the sight of that beast smashing through the hotel's glass doors, but a rush of sound and motion. A blur swept through the lobby, distorting all colors for a moment. Then I found myself in a room no longer empty. Midnight had arrived, along with a hotel receptionist behind the front desk. He was frowning at me, unsurprisingly, given that I had spontaneously appeared out of thin air. "Where did you—" the late-night worker began before rubbing his eyes. Never mind. Do you need a room, sir?" I shook my head whilst clambering up from the sofa. Then I hurried outside and walked to a local petrol station. As I walked through the Larry streets of Carlisle at midnight, I thought about my situation. Eventually, my eyes stopped resisting the urge, and I timidly looked at my aching body below. I nearly choked on my own breath. There was no explaining it. My legs, my arms, all of my extremities, in fact. They all looked 3 or 4 inches longer than the day before. And I'd known that since the stroke of midnight. I'd already felt the change in my body. I just hadn't accepted it for the first half an hour or so, as adrenaline had been jumbling my thoughts. Adrenaline from the horror of being stalked by that thing. Now, of course, there are greater horrors swirling in my mind. Horrifying questions. Was that giant once a man like me? Am I fated to become him? He's gone. I startle awake, elbow forcefully jamming into Chris's side as I steal him from his sleep. It was around 7 a.m. when I heard him outside his tent, pacing about on the dry leaves. The noise stopped a short while later. It is now 8:30 a.m. Any traces of Richard, his tent, or supplies have disappeared. What do you mean? Chris blinked groggily. He squinted as his face emerged from the sleeping bag. Richard's left, he's gone. Where the fuck is he? I start scrambling, pulling at the zips on my sleeping bag as I get into a crouching position to leave the tent. The forest floor is untouched. Any traces of Richard have been scrubbed from its memory, masked in a thick layer of auburn leaves. How long has he been gone? Can't have been more than an hour? Is he taking a piss? Chris asks dismissively. No, like he's fucking gone and left. He's taken his tent down and disappeared. I guffaw in disbelief. This startles him into a sense of alert. No, you're joking. Where's he gone? Chris's head peers over my shoulder into the clearing. He's honestly taking the piss. What the fuck's he gotten up to? I get out of the tent and into an upright position, my joints creaking as I take a few steps to examine the clearing and the nearby woods for any signs of Richard. A neat patchwork of pine trees envelops the surroundings. At certain angles I can see between the long promenades of trees, forming into straight rows to provide a narrow view of the distance. But this doesn't help much. This isn't like him. We're 12 years into these hiking trips, and not once has he ever strayed so much as a few feet from the group. We are all very much team players and rely on group consensus for any important decisions. My stomach exudes a feeling of discomfort and unease. Did he tell us he was leaving? I honestly don't remember. I clamber back into the tent and over Chris, rummaging through the rucksack until my hands grasp a cold metallic slab. I take my phone and re-enter the clearing, raising it on point towards the sky as if offering it up to some unseen deity. No signal. I swear I had at least 2 bars last night. We set up camp here because it's the first place for miles that I received any notifications. I meant to give Jane a message to let her know we were okay. Shit. I'll have to call her when I get the chance. Chris's eyes widen and he starts moving with urgency, heading back towards the tent. He pulls out a waterproof jacket and fumbles through the pockets for his phone. I was going to show you how these worked, but I got some of those trackers a few months ago. Because of the bag and shit we lost last time, I thought we could put these on all our stuff. Chris's explanations were muddled under the weight of his intense concentration. He stares, unblinking at his phone, hands shaking slightly as he opens and closes apps until he finds the right one. I think I put 2 in Rich's bag thinking it was mine. I couldn't find them in my rucksack last night. I don't respond, as if not to break the spell of this alchemist working unearthly magic to return our friend. Here, he exclaims with some confidence, presenting me with phone screen. I see a map. Barely a map. More a large, deep green plain with very few details. But I notice some pinpoints in 2 bunches at top and bottom of the display. Chris gestures to the bottom group. This is us, I think. And the ones up there are the ones Rich has got. He taps the screen and we zoom in on the ones we think to be Richard's. There's no way, I retort. That's 22 miles away. He's been gone a fucking hour. How did he get 22 miles away? Do we even know what direction that's in? Mate, I don't know. Chris lets out a nervous chuckle to break the tension. But it's GPS and it says 5 minutes ago. He swipes the screen to refresh. The pinpoints shuffle slightly further up the screen as the time now reads 60 seconds ago. I mean, he is a runner. Maybe he went full pelt over there. Chris smirks and looks for my validation. That's insane. I spit back, exasperated. He can't have gone that far. That's fucking ridiculous. Did someone give him a lift? I sense my mocking tone cutting at Chris, so I reel it in and collect myself. How accurate are these? Is it still tracking him? Chris doesn't respond, instead tilting the phone screen in my direction so I can verify it for myself. He's taken his shit and he's headed off in that direction. Chris gestures through the dense thatch of trees. We plan to be out here for 3 nights, so we can get to him by this evening and head back in the morning. We'll be 8. Is he still moving? I ask. I resign myself the premises of this situation and start prodding at the feasibility of Chris's plan. Looks like he's settled for now, Chris replies. When we get signal, we'll give him a call or something and ask him to head back towards us. He's probably lost, though. How's he going to make his way back? Look, once we speak with him, we can sort this out. Unless he's gone absolutely fucking mental, we can get him to head back and meet us somewhere. It's about 9 a.m. now. We could make it by 4-ish if we head off now. Without waiting for my agreement, Chris reaches for his rucksack and starts fixing it on his back. I do the same. I feel a tightness in my stomach, an unease which seeps into my bones. I think of Jane and I sweep the sky for phone signal in one last Hail Mary attempt. No luck. I follow Chris's lead and fasten my rucksack on tight. We head off into the woods in search of Richard. The forest becomes thicker as we journey forward. We are slowed by the tangle of dead branches and shallow roots. Carefully, I watch where I step, and I feel a creeping pain in my neck from holding it at such an uncomfortable angle. The cacophony of bugs and insects ring just slightly louder than my tinnitus. We travel in silence for a large part of the journey. When we do speak, we focus entirely on logistics. Chris keeps his eyes fixed on the way forward, only interrupted by brief glances at his phone to ensure the path ahead is correct. We have missed our deadline by a good few hours, but Richard doesn't seem to have moved in that time. The pinpoints show his location as unchanged, with only slight shifts left and right, as if he's swaying in some drunken stupor. At least it gives us confidence that the tags are still on his person. I clench my fists as I resist the urge to scratch the bug bites covering my forearms and shins, shaking sweat from my hands. I get flashes of discomfort when I feel my clothes sticking to me, and the aches and pains of having walked nearly 20 miles. The GPS and our exhaustion are the only indicators that we have made progress. The scenery remains entirely monolithic. The sun starts to set as we close in on Richard. We start calling out his name softly at first, as if too loud a sound would anger the forest. With confidence growing and distance narrowing, we shout for him. Sweat and spittle rain from my face as the last of my energy is spent demanding his attention. No response. The night robs us of the ability to see more than a few dozen feet in front of us. So I listen, hearing only the footsteps of Chris and myself. The insects grow louder, but so does the gentle patter of running water. As if by some break in the fabric of reality, the forest suddenly and unexpectedly ceases in front of us. We come to a large clearing about the length of a football pitch. The forest still dominates the surroundings, lining the other side of the clearing as it stretches for countless miles further. But the clearing is wide, reaching far beyond my field of vision. The dense undergrowth has given way to soft grass, trees replaced by wild bushes no more than a foot high. A river runs through the clearing, cutting straight through the middle. The jagged rocks on the riverbed cut ripples into the water's surface. It's jet black and viscous, harshly reflecting the moonlight off its inky surface. In front of us, the river forks and rejoins not much further down, forming an elliptical island in the middle. A large oak tree with a wide base and mighty trunk has taken root defiantly in the middle of the island, alone. It stands large and squat against the backdrop of imposing pine trees, noticeably conspicuous the abrupt clearing. I grab Chris's hand to turn the phone towards me. All it shows is the same deep green forest we have spent our day conquering. No clearing, no stream, nothing. Richard's there. He's by the tree. Oh my fucking God. I feel the energy surging back into my muscles as I sprint towards the riverbank, now screaming his name, my throat burning. Chris takes only a moment to catch, and he's there running alongside me, flailing his arms as if stranded at sea. I take about 3 steps into the water before the cold hits me. Compared to the warmth of the day, the water feels icy and hostile. I flinch and retreat a few steps back towards the riverbank. I use this opportunity to get a better look at Richard. All I can make out is his silhouette standing motionless to the left of the tree. His face is completely obscured by shadows. I can't tell if he's facing towards or away from us. The lights of our headlamps dissipate before reaching the island. Chris is continuing to shout Richard's name, punctuated by a few, "What the fuck are you doing?" and "How the fuck did you get there?" says. But Richard just remains, motionless, bathed in dark, as if dissolving into the vast expanse of the forest behind him. I jerk my body around to find my rucksack laying at the edge of the clearing. I must have shed it when we started running. Chris doesn't wait, wading into the waist-high water without a second thought. He lets out a few pained grunts as the water envelops his torso and stomach. His arms ride abreast the water, and he glides slowly through towards Richard. I'm not far behind him, dragging my rucksack into the water and clenching my teeth as I brace for the first few steps in. We make our way through the water as the current suddenly picks up. I see Chris bowled over by the sudden force. I brace myself against the current, feeling it surging through me with a tremendous rush of power. A strap of my rucksack is tied around my hand as to not lose it, but I'm pulled off balance by the force on the bag. My head becomes submerged as I'm dragged downstream by my wrist. I dig my heels in and pull back against the force, twisting my neck round to gasp for breath. Richard is watching me from beneath the tree. After a moment, I have my head out of the water and my feet firmly planted on the ground. The current has dissipated. I examine the surroundings and find that I have only drifted a few feet off course. Chris is not too far away. The adrenaline dissipates, leaving me defenseless against the bitter cold. Wading over, I notice Chris's attention is fixed elsewhere. "Hey, where did Richard go?" Chris asks sharply between harsh draws of breath. "Did you see him? I swear he was here just now." I stop for breath and confirm for myself that yes, you're right, he's not here. He has simply disappeared like he did before. Of course he did. I don't even flinch at these embers of hope slipping through my fingers. I just focus on pulling myself towards the island. We reach the slight stretch of land, now uninhabited. My bones slowly defrost from the water, teeth chattering. I click my headlamp on to confirm. No footprints, no disturbance of any kind. The river returns to a quiet trickle of water. "This is fucked. Where the fuck are we?" Chris panics, pulling his phone out his pocket and shaking off water droplets. "I can't feel my bloody fingers," he moans as he locks himself out. I release his phone from his grip to wipe the remaining water off on the grass and punch in his passcode. "It's here. Where's the bag?" I search frantically, looking for a rucksack or a coat or something scattered on the ground. The phone says the trackers are still here, even if Richard is not. "Where the fuck has he gone?" Chris whispers harshly for my attention, as if not to catch the attention of a nearby predator. His eyes are red and watery in the torchlight. I cannot give him any answers. That could not have been him. That was not fucking him. We're fucked. Still, I remain silent. I push that pit in my stomach deep down back into hell. Instead, I reach for my phone and raise it aloft. Still nothing. Fuck's sake. Nothing has come through in the past day. No one knows where we are. We've only been gone a day and a half. Jane is still at the cabin and is not expecting us back until at least Monday evening. We're 22 miles off track and one man down. Our reputation for disappearing for days at a time has proven to be a sore irony. "Right," I assert with all the authority I can muster. "Let's cut our losses, get the fuck away from here, and set up camp somewhere. We'll head back as far as we can tomorrow, and if I get any phone signal, I'll call for a rescue team or something." I attempt to instill a confidence in Chris which is not particularly well-founded. There's no signal anywhere. This place isn't even on the fucking map. Like I said, we're leaving here. We're not staying. We'll set up camp about a mile away and we should get back just all right. I spit with righteous indignation. But we can't just leave Rich, like we can't just leave him lost out here. He's fucking somewhere right. Chris pleads with an uncharacteristic meekness. Well, that's his own fucking fault, isn't it? The comment lingers in the air, stinging my mouth with its vitriol. We wait in silence for a moment before I turn to head back. My torch catches the base of the tree. I turn back to illuminate the trunk where I scan upwards towards the top, resting about head height. I stare at the carvings etched into the wood. Carefully sculpted are angular, geometric shapes in rows running from top to bottom. I graze my fingers along them, recognizing them to be Norse runes. Up and down they have been carefully transcribed. I rub my fingertips together, examining the deep red coating they've been gifted. The metallic smell confirms that it is blood. I examine the tree again, and the entire face of the trunk has been haphazardly smeared in the same deep red. A sense of realization washes over me. This must be why Richard brought us here. Chris shuffles over, his blind panic now subsiding into a sense of calm. I know it. These are symbols of protection. They bring fortune and good luck to those who happen upon them. Chris eyes them up and down in silence. We both breathe calmness into our lungs. I retrieve my rucksack from the riverbed and carefully dig through it. I unsheath the kitchen knife and bring it back to the tree. Scanning the bark for any signs of instruction, I rub more blood onto my fingers and examine it closely. It appears that the blood fixes a connection of some kind between the donor and the runes, endowing the traveler with good omens. Chris, unspeaking, presents me with his palm. I look to him for approval before firmly pressing into it and slicing through the center, just above his thumb and across his heart line. He doesn't react. I present mine to him and do the same, digging in to ensure a decent amount of blood. A sense of warmth grows from my hand up my forearm and into my body. I inhale deeply and hold the moment in my mind. Taking his hand with mine, we press them together, squeezing them with my other hand to strengthen the bond. We both reach for the tree and smear our own deep red paint over the runes. I scan over the markings again and recognize some of them. Protection, love, good health. Yes, this is what we need. We are out here, in the apathy and brutality of wilderness. These omens will protect us from whatever is lurking. Chris is smiling with his eyes. He knows it just like I do. I reach over and caress his face, smearing a line of blood across his forehead. I turn to study the runes. One calls out to me with an aura of love. Algis, protection, of course. I clutch the knife and raise it to his forehead, delicately but decisively carving the rune into his skin. He doesn't flinch, holding the same euphoric expression but now grinning ear to ear. The job only takes a moment, and once finished, I wipe the drops of blood across his face and cheeks. I pass him the knife and lean forward in excited anticipation. He carves Sowelo, sun, into my forehead, pure ecstasy. We are both overcome with awe at our good fortune. Richard has led us here to bring us out of the forests and into the light, back to our friends and family, waiting for us with open arms. I feel the ground vibrate, shifting beneath our feet. We startle and step back. The ground gives way to a hole at the base of the tree. We pause for a moment as I peer into the newly formed chasm. It has opened up a tunnel into the earth, fit for man, stretching deep into blackness, curving underneath the tree and out of sight. Chris is staring deep into me. We share an unspoken knowledge of what we must do. Chris once again presents me with his hand, face up towards the blackened sky. I rest it in mine and press the knife down into the first joint of his forefinger. It snaps with a satisfying cleanness. Chris stares at his palm with quiet solemnity. I move to the next finger and repeat the process. Crack. Just as pure as the first. One by one, each finger is severed at the first joint. I coddle the severed pieces in my hand with the care of rosary beads. He leans forward, eyes closed, as I gently place one of them in his mouth. The rest are tossed down the hole with a quiet murmur of prayer. He shuts his lips tight and holds it there, savoring the sensation in deep meditation. Chris opens his eyes to take me in one final time. We share a look of knowing. His features betray the joy he is hiding. He is truly at peace. Without a sound, Chris slips into the hole beneath the tree, arms raised above his head to ease his descent. He vanishes into the abyss below without a single word. I remain on the overworld, now truly alone. I raise my hand in the same ritual fashion and bring a knife to my forefinger and begin pressing down. A pain shoots through me, not from my hand but my face. I stagger backwards and clutch my jaw with both hands, dropping the knife. Tears rush down my cheeks as my facial muscles convulse. I've been screaming for a long time. My throat is red hot, torn to shreds. I look at my hands. I look at the tree. I look at the hole. I kneel over it on all fours and scream with all the strength I can muster. Chris, Chris! I wail with a hoarseness that betrays my sheer panic. I shoot up to my feet and whip my head around to catch a sign of anything watching. The forest lies silent. Scrambling with reckless urgency, I head for water and start paddling. The cold is irrelevant in the face of the pain coursing through my face and hands. I pull the water past me and clamber for the riverbed. I don't dare turn back to face what may be waiting for me. Instead, I head back into the forest and running faster than I ever thought capable of. The wind brings me back around before the aching of my limbs sets in. I startle awake, fully clothed, sprawled out at the base of a tree. Dense forest surrounds me. The sun peers through the canopy as morning sets in. Frantically patting my pockets, I feel for my phone and nothing else. The woods are silent, no insects, no footsteps. Just the faint sound of wind brushing past my ears. I let out a guttural, full-bodied scream for what feels like hours. Nothing. I can taste dryness in my mouth, but that discomfort pales in comparison to the ruthless beating the rest of my body is reeling from. Before my mind can begin processing it, my body starts moving. I'm pulled out of my fatigue by a primal thirst for survival. Stumbling through the forest, I push against the tree trunks to steady my balance and propel me forwards. I don't know where I'm going. Thoughts of Chris and Richard hammer at the door of my mind as uninvited guests, demanding an audience. Their images don't bring me tears, but stress. I need to help myself first, then I can help them. Licking my wounds out in the arse end of nowhere isn't going to bring a rescue party. I swipe my thumb over the jagged shards of my phone screen and enter the passcode. I open maps and hold it arm's length in front of me, squinting into the dimmed light for a glimpse of my lifeline. No signal, but GPS is working fine. Deep green smear enveloping face of the phone, no details whatsoever. Fine, whatever. I can tell north from south like a tit from an arse now. I swivel on my heels, face southeast, and keep walking. After I'm not sure how long, I find myself led to another clearing. The scenery breaks as abruptly as before, but now I'm high up on a cliffside. Probably about 100, 200 feet below me is a sheer drop. An uninviting tangle of stone and fate beckons from the base of the cliff. From there, the forest wrestles back control and sprawls endlessly in every direction beyond the horizon. Tears of stress concentrate in my eyes. Where the fuck did this come from? The forest has been nothing but a flat, uninterrupted plain for the entire trip, and now I'm standing a few hundred feet in the air. I've not seen a single hill this entire trip. What the fuck is this? I pause to collect myself and decide on the play. Like the river, the cliff face stretches for miles on each end. A fault line in the earth splitting the world into two halves. This is the way forward. The map proves aggravatingly useless, yet again at providing me with routes or alternatives or anything fucking helpful in the slightest. My heart jumps and I almost drop the phone down the cliffside. The vibration sends tremors up my arm and my entire body into alert. Jane is calling. I stare dumbly at the screen for a beyond reasonable length of time. No emotions penetrate the fortress of my concentration as I raise the phone to my ear. "Ed?" she asks sheepishly. "Honey? Oh my God, I am so glad to hear your voice." Relief washes over me as her voice lights a warm glow of hope. "Where the fuck have you gone?" Her fury is palpable. The brief flicker of hope has been extinguished and my soul hollowed out. I've been worrying nonstop for the past 3 nights. Becky is worried. The kids are worried. Is Chris with you? What the fuck were you thinking? I gasp to interrupt, but Jane only builds momentum. "You left in the dead of night, 2 in the fucking morning. I called the police. They've been searching for the past 2 days. What the fuck do I tell the kids?" A headache burns from my forehead as I stammer a response to stem the tide of anger and accusation. "We went hiking. It wasn't..." "No fucking shit you went hiking. You took everything. Where have the kitchen knives gone?" Becky was crying. The kids are terrified. What the fuck are you doing? My jaw hangs agape, defenseless against the pain of her scorn. I don't know. I'm sorry. But we lost Richard. He went off and we had to..." "Who the fuck is Richard?" she screams, her volume reaching a fever pitch. I have to pull the phone away from my ear. "What the fuck are you talking about? Who is Richard?" I start to feel faint and stagger backwards, clutching at my stomach as I resist the urge to throw up. He came with us on the trip and we lost him and we went to find him, but Chris..." I breathlessly scramble for an explanation. "What? Who is this? How the fuck did you end up in the middle of the forest with some random stranger? Where is Chris? Is he with you?" "No, he's gone. Jane screams in complete hysteria. "What do you mean he's gone? What's happening?" My hands are trembling and my mind is vacant. Me and Chris and Richard, we were camping and we were looking for... He got lost in the woods, so we started looking because the phone... Just... Please... My voice trails off as I hear sobbing down the other end of the phone. Jane's anger has subsided into meek, desperate pleading for answers. "Ed, where are you? Can you tell me where you are?" "We're lost. I'm lost. I don't know where Chris is." At this point, I am spent. All I need is the confirmation of my worst suspicions. Me, Richard, and Chris left on Friday afternoon and walked about 10 miles into the forest and set up camp. I enunciate each of the details for my own sake as much as hers. It feels like a lie told to myself over and over until I'm convinced it's truth. "Ed, you're really scaring me. Who is Richard? We don't know a Richard. We're in the middle of nowhere. How did you meet him?" I fall silent at the weight of this question. I hang up, message my location, and put the phone down. I'm lost, truly and definitively lost. For how long now, I do not know. The tethers of reality I clung to have only served to drag me further in. I sit in silt and mud, reeling in the weight of the conversation. I've been lost for a long while. How many of us were there? How many of us were there ever on these trips? Was it 3 or just 2 or 4 or 7.5? Could there have been loads of us in a naked orgy for all I know? Or was I just wanking myself off in the wilderness for a long weekend? Richard and I were groomsmen for Chris and Becky's wedding. We were at university together. He had been out with us every fucking year since we started hiking. What the fuck was she on about? I sit with these thoughts for a while and come to no conclusions. Hugging my knees to my chest, the stress boils over into floods of tears. I wipe my face gaze at the beauty of the forest. From this vantage point, the true might of nature is at full display. Shades of green and black stand defiantly against the amber and gold of the setting sun. A perfect balance of all life, endless space and creation. From here I'm gliding over it, stealing a view reserved only for the birds and the gods. I drift through the next few hours like a ghost amongst the living. The sun has long since set, and seeing anything more than a few feet away is impossible now. Not that it matters, really. I tread, arms outstretched, stumbling through the overgrowth, feeling my way through the trees. There's nothing left but to move. Even the wind has ceased caressing my ears with its soft whistling. The silence engulfs me in its firm embrace. Keep going. I tread aimlessly through the forest with only the faintest memory or care for directions. Keep going. Go on, lad, keep moving. That's it. Steady on. You're almost there. You're on the way home, lad. I can feel it in the distance. You're doing it. You're going. Oh my God, you're going to get home. Bravo, my son. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. You're almost there. You're almost fucking home. You're here. You're here. I see a gentle light through the trees. A red hue bathes the far side of the trees in long streaks of overgrowth. Like a moth, I single-mindedly fall towards it, transfixed. It grows brighter, but I don't squint. In the forest, nestled in a small clearing no more than a few meters wide, is Richard's tent. The soft torchlight glows from inside, dyed a warm red by its canvas walls, illuminating in all directions the blackness of the forest. It sits peacefully amongst the trees, a promise of comfort in a hostile world. Home. I glide towards the tent, my feet no longer burdened by the traps and snares of the forest floor. My hand strokes the canvas, dispensing fragments of dried blood along its side. I inhale the warmth into my lungs. Crouching down, I reach around the left-hand side of the tent and gently tug on the zipper. It softly purrs as I trace the semicircle of the opening. The canvas door falls away and grants me entry. Everything in here is Richard's, neatly folded and arranged around the floor of the tent. LED lights emit a soft glow, twisted around the tent poles and suspended in the air like fireflies. Richard's books and glasses sit patiently to the right of the tent next to a flask of coffee and a cigarette. This is a man whom I understand with all my being. 2 sleeping bags lay neatly in the center. Chris is there, sleeping soundly on the floor. A soft happiness fills my body. Chris's chest isn't rising, but he looks peaceful. His eyes are closed and a satisfied grin decorates his face. I lean closer towards him. He smells wonderful. His hands feel cold to the touch as I rub the stubs of his fingers. Facing away, I lay down next to him, curling into a slight fetal position to allow him to spoon my body. I snuggle my back into his chest as to warm him with my life. Footsteps, emerging from the forest, move towards the tent and a shadow appears against the canvas. It stretches high up the walls, either impossibly large or uncomfortably close. It begins circling us with the crackling of dry leaves announcing every step. The shadow is joined by a second, entering into the parade around the tent. They clap and click in quiet rhythm. Slow and soft at first, the sound swells with confidence as another pair of hands join the ensemble. The shadows are accompanied by yet another which begins murmuring under its breath, clicking in counterpoint to the rest. I lay there in Chris's embrace, watching in quiet contemplation as the performance unfolds. This rhythmic cacophony grows as drums, claps, snaps, shouts, and jeers form a rich tapestry of celebration outside. The shuffling of feet creates viscous white noise as at least a dozen bodies circle the tent. They all chant in unison a song, an ancient song. It spins me into a psychedelic ecstasy as I mouth the words along with them, failing to produce any sound. I lie there, unblinking as a pool of spit forms on the ground beneath my mouth. Chris reaches over to my shoulder and wraps his arm around me. I warm his flesh with my love for all things. My eyes close as I become one with this moment. The tent unzips and I feel something pulling at the floor. It steps inside, and I am greeted with warm understanding throughout my body. Saying nothing, seeing nothing, I know it is Richard. My chest raises unevenly as I draw breath with excitement. He lays down in front of me and I hold him, trembling, the same way Chris is holding me. From the way he feels, I can tell he is longer, but I don't open my eyes. The crowd grows louder in frenetic jubilation. I feel the heat emanating from Richard, and his moisture coats my face, hands and clothes. We lay here together in the center of this world. This is truly the home I was seeking. I need no sound, no sight, no feeling. Just the knowledge that I will be held here in this space, entwined in the friendship of my greatest companions forever. I've never been one for posting my experiences online, but after what happened last week, I feel like I don't have a choice. I need to get this out of my head. Maybe someone will believe me. Maybe someone will know what I'm supposed to do next, because I can't stop thinking about it. It all started when I went back to my hometown in New Mexico. I hadn't been there in years, but my parents still lived in the same house I grew up in, and guilt had been gnawing at me for avoiding them. It was a small, quiet desert town surrounded by endless stretches of wilderness, the kind of place where stories linger longer than the people who tell them. One evening during dinner, my dad mentioned the hiking trails we used to explore when I was a kid. He said they'd reopened recently and casually suggested I check them out. But stick to the main paths, he warned. A lot of strange stuff happens out there. I brushed it off as a typical small-town superstition. Growing up, I'd heard my share of stories about weird lights, unexplainable noises, and the ever-popular skinwalker legend. It always felt like a scare tactic to keep kids from wandering too far. I'd spent hours out there as a teenager and never saw anything unusual. So the next evening, I grabbed a flashlight and headed out just before sunset. The trails were overgrown but still recognizable. The air was crisp, and the fading sunlight painted the horizon in warm shades of orange and pink. I took my time, letting nostalgia guide my steps, until I reached a fork in the path I didn't remember. One direction led uphill, toward the ridges overlooking the valley. The other curved downward, following the sound of rushing water. The river wasn't on the original trail map, but the sound of water was strangely inviting. I figured it might be worth exploring. I turned my flashlight on, even though the fading twilight still offered some visibility, and started down the slope. The air grew colder the closer I got to the river, and the trees became denser, their gnarled branches arching overhead like a tunnel. The sound of water grew louder, echoing off unseen rocks. Something about it felt off. The rushing water had an uneven cadence, like it was stuttering. My footsteps, too, seemed to echo strangely, just slightly out of sync with my movements, like something was walking a beat behind me. I kept stopping to listen, but every time I did, the forest fell completely silent. When I reached the riverbank, the sight was both beautiful and eerie. The water reflected the pale moonlight, shimmering as it flowed over jagged stones. But the landscape didn't feel right. The trees along the bank seemed unnaturally twisted, their trunks warped as if they'd been bent by unseen hands. The air smelled metallic, sharp, and out of place. That's when I noticed the tracks. They were in the mud near the edge of the river, huge, elongated prints. At first glance, they looked human, but something was off about the proportions. The toes were too long, the heel too narrow, and they sank deeper into the mud than any person's weight could justify. I crouched down to get a closer look, and that's when I heard it. A voice. My voice. Help me. It came from the other side of the river, low and rasping, but unmistakably my own. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't the wind, it was me, calling out from somewhere in the trees. Help me. It said again, louder this time, a desperate, broken plea that sent chills down my spine. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I scanned the opposite bank, the beam cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw it. It was crouched near the water's edge, its pale, sagging skin catching the light. At first I thought it was a man, but the longer I stared, the less human it became. Its limbs were unnaturally long, bent at strange angles like a marionette with tangled strings. Its head hung low, the face obscured by matted hair, but I could feel its eyes on me, black, soulless pits that seemed to drink in the light. Help me, it said again, but this time its mouth moved, and the words didn't match the sound. The voice was still mine, but the thing's lips jerked open and closed like a bad animatronic. The pauses between the words were wrong, fragmented, as if it was struggling to piece them together. Help. Me. It croaked again, dragging out the last syllable. It stood then, rising to its full, impossible height, its head nearly grazing the branches overhead. The skin around its joints cracked and stretched as it moved, like it was wearing a suit that didn't fit. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a root, and fell hard into the mud. The flashlight slipped from my grip, rolling a few feet away. In the chaos, I looked back across the river, but the thing was gone. My breath came in ragged gasps as I scrambled to my feet, searching the tree line with shaking hands. The forest was silent now. Even the sound of the water seemed muffled. Then I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. It was on my side of the river. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, so I did. I tore through the trees, branches whipping at my face, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly ahead of me. Behind me, I heard it crashing through the underbrush, its movements uneven and wet, like something crawling and stumbling all at once. And then it began to mimic me. It called out my name, over and over in my voice. "Come back, please," it wailed. "Wait, for me, wait, for..." The desperation in its tone was uncanny, like it was trying to crawl inside my head, to make me feel sorry for it. I don't know how I made it back to the main trail. I don't remember the details. I just remember the relief of seeing my car in the distance, and the sheer terror of hearing its footsteps growing louder. I dove into the driver's seat, locking the doors and starting the engine in one motion. As I peeled out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of it in the rearview mirror. It was standing in the middle of the trail, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching me. Its mouth hung open, that horrible grin stretched wide across its face. And then it waved. I don't know how I made it home that night. My hands were shaking so badly I almost crashed twice. I spent the night sitting in the corner of my bedroom with the lights on, clutching a baseball bat like it would make a difference. The worst part came the next morning. When I opened my front door, my flashlight was lying on the porch. It was clean. I'd seen it fall into the mud when I tripped, rolling down the slope toward the riverbank. There was no way it should have been here, clean, spotless, like it had never left my hand. I haven't gone back to the trail since, and I don't think I ever will. But sometimes, late at night, I hear something outside my window. A soft knock, followed by the sound of my own voice begging me to let it in. I didn't sleep much after that night. Even with the lights on, even with the bat clutched in my hands, I couldn't close my eyes without hearing that soft knock on the window, or the distorted echoes of my own voice calling out to me. Every sound outside, branches brushing against the house, a coyote howling in the distance, set my nerves on edge. I started to question what was real and what was in my head, but I didn't dare look out the window. The knocking didn't come every night. Some nights were eerily quiet, which almost made it worse. At least with the knocks, I knew where it was, or thought I did. On the quiet nights, I could feel it watching me, its presence like an unseen weight pressing against the walls of the house. I kept every door locked, every curtain drawn, and the flashlight within arm's reach. It wasn't enough. 3 nights after my encounter, I woke up to something new. The sound of footsteps on the roof. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone, or something, was pacing back and forth. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor, so it was right above me. The ceiling seemed to creak with every step, each one sending a chill down my spine. I gripped the bat tighter, my breathing shallow, trying to convince myself it was just an animal. But deep down, I knew better. "Let me in." The words were muffled, coming from somewhere above. It was my voice again, but weaker this time, like it was strained or dying. The footsteps stopped directly above my bed. "Please, I'm cold." It spoke again, but this time it wasn't just my voice. There was something else beneath it, like a guttural growl trying to mimic human speech. I clamped my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to stop, willing it to go away. The pacing resumed, faster now, erratic, like it was angry. And then it was gone. Morning brought no comfort. There were no signs of footprints on the roof, no damage, nothing to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But the smell, that metallic, coppery tang, still lingered faintly in the air. It was the same smell from the river, the same smell that clung to the skinwalker. It was real. And it wasn't leaving. I thought about telling someone, but what would I even say? No one would believe me, not without seeing it for themselves. Even then, would they? I debated leaving town, driving as far away as I could, but I had this gnawing feeling that it wouldn't matter. It had found me once, It would find me again. That afternoon, I decided to confront it, not because I was brave, but because I was desperate. I needed to know if it was real, if it was still watching me, or if I was losing my grip on reality. I waited until dusk, when the shadows were long and the air carried that faint metallic edge. I left the house with my flashlight and bat and started walking toward the river. The town was quiet as I made my way out to the trails. Too quiet. No dogs barking, no cars passing by, not even the faint hum of insects. Just my own footsteps crunching against the gravel. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving me alone in the dark with only the beam of my flashlight to guide me. As I moved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, heavier, like the forest was holding its breath. I could feel it watching me even before I saw it. My flashlight flickered as the sound of rushing water grew louder, and I knew I was close. But I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I reached the riverbank. It was standing in the middle of the water, partially submerged, its head tilted at that unnatural angle. The moonlight caught its pale, sagging skin, making it almost glow. Its eyes, black endless pits, locked onto me as soon as I stepped into view. "Why?" I managed to choke out. My voice sounded small, pathetic even to me. "What do you want?" It didn't move at first, it just stared, its expression unreadable. Then it smiled. That same horrible, too-wide grin that stretched its face like a rubber mask. "You," it said, its voice layered and distorted, shifting between my own and something inhuman. "You brought me here. I don't remember running. I don't remember much at all after that, just fragmented flashes of terror. The crashing sound of branches behind me, the flashlight flickering wildly as I sprinted down the trail, the growing realization that no matter how fast I ran, it was keeping pace, its footsteps uneven and wet, always just out of sight. When I finally broke out of the woods and into the edge of town, I felt like I'd crossed an invisible boundary. The air felt lighter, cleaner, and the oppressive sense of being watched lifted, if only slightly. I didn't stop running until I reached the first lit building I could find, a gas station on the outskirts of town. The clerk gave me a strange look as I stumbled inside, gasping for breath, covered in sweat and dirt. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words wouldn't come. All I could manage was, "Please don't let it in." I stayed there for hours, too scared to leave, too scared to tell the full story. The clerk humored me, locking the doors and keeping an eye on the windows, though he clearly thought I was crazy. At some point, I must have fallen asleep in one of the plastic chairs near the counter. When I woke up, the gas station was empty, the doors unlocked, the lights flickering. I was alone, and that metallic smell was back. The faint sound of footsteps echoed outside the door, slow and deliberate. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't come inside. And then the lights went out. If anyone has heard of something like this, please let me know. I don't know how to make it stop, and I'm running out of places to hide. I live in a 5-story apartment complex, and my bathroom has an odd setup. One mirror faces another, creating an infinity effect. One of the mirrors is part of the medicine cabinet. When you look into one, the reflections seem to stretch endlessly, like they're pulling you into some otherworldly void. I've lived here for almost 2 years now, just me and my daughter, and those mirrors have always made me feel uneasy. There's this strange, almost unreal sensation when I look into them, like I'm slipping out of reality. Maybe it's a kind of depersonalization, but whatever it is, it's unsettling. When I stare too long, it stops feeling like I'm looking at my own reflection. Instead, it feels like someone else is staring back at me, someone who knows far too much about me. It gives me the creeps. This morning, something felt especially off. As I moved my head slightly, I noticed that one of the reflections, about the 9th one back, was delayed. It didn't move in sync with the others. For a split second, it just stood there, watching before catching up. I brushed it off. Sleep deprivation can play tricks on your mind, and having a newborn means I'm running on fumes most of the time. That night, after putting my daughter back to bed for the 3rd time, I went to the bathroom again. It happened again. But this time, the delay was closer, around the 5th reflection. It was far more noticeable. My stomach dropped, and a cold wave of fear washed over me. I realized I've always felt uneasy around mirrors, though I never gave it much thought before. I remembered a time years ago when I was tripping and stared into a mirror for what felt like hours. Ever since then, I haven't been the same. Mirrors don't feel like mere glass to me. They feel like doorways, and whatever's on the other side, I don't want to know. The next night was quiet until 3 a.m. I woke up to feed my daughter. After putting her back to bed, I headed to the bathroom. That's when I heard it, a low, hollow thump from behind the medicine cabinet. The sound made me freeze. My heart started pounding, and before I could talk myself out of it, I swung the mirror open. What I saw wasn't the shelf of medicines I was expecting. There was no shelf. Instead, there was a gaping, dark hole that seemed to stretch back endlessly. And standing in the center of that void was a figure. It looked just like me. No, not exactly like me. Its features were unnaturally smooth, like it had been carved from porcelain. Its eyes were pitch black, deep, empty voids that seemed to swallow the dim bathroom light. It tilted its head, and the movement was accompanied by a sharp clicking sound, like bones snapping into place. I slammed the cabinet shut so hard the mirror cracked. My hands were shaking as I ran down the hall to my daughter's room. But when I opened the door, the crib was empty. She was gone. Panic took over. My mind raced as I ran from room to room. Then I heard it, a sound that stopped me cold, crying. It was coming from the living room. I bolted down the stairs and found her lying on the couch, but something was wrong. As I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't her. It looked like her, but something was off. Her movements were stiff, unnatural. The crying stopped abruptly as she turned to look at me. Her wide eyes glistened in the dim light. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she smiled. A slow, deliberate grin that sent chills down my spine. I backed away, trembling, and before I could think of what to do, I blacked out. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. My daughter was in her crib, cooing like nothing had happened. But there's one thing I can't shake. She's developed a strange fascination with mirrors. She stares at them for hours, giggling and reaching out, like she's playing with someone or something, only she can see. Ice fishing had always been a tradition for us. Me, Mark, and Eric. Every January, we'd pack up the gear, pile into Eric's old truck, and drive out to the frozen lake that sat miles away from the nearest town. The lake was quiet, almost forgotten, but that's what made it special. That year we arrived just as the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered world in shades of orange and pink. The air was bitter cold, sharp enough to bite through the thickest coats. The ice groaned beneath our boots as we walked to our usual spot near the center of the lake. We drilled our holes, set up the lines, and cracked open a few beers, talking about everything and nothing as the stars blinked into existence. The only sounds were the distant moan of the wind and the occasional creak of the ice shifting beneath us. It was Mark who first noticed something strange. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing out toward the far edge of the lake. I followed his gaze and saw what he meant. A dark shape, tall and thin, was standing near the tree line. It was too far away to make out any details, but it wasn't moving. "Probably just a tree," Eric said, brushing it off. "Don't let your imagination get to you." But as the hours passed and the moon climbed higher, the shape didn't go away. Worse, it seemed closer. I tried to focus on my fishing line, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, but the unease was impossible to ignore. The temperature seemed to drop even further, the wind carrying whispers that didn't belong. Then it happened. The ice beneath us let out a long, low groan, louder than before. We all froze, staring at each other. Mark's lantern flickered, its flame sputtering as if gasping for air. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Eric nodded, his face pale. "The ice? It's thinner here than it should be." And then we heard it. A wet, scraping sound like nails dragging across the frozen surface. "Something's out there," Mark said, his voice trembling. The dark shape at the edge of the lake was gone. Before any of us could say a word, the scraping grew louder, closer. I turned just in time to see a figure rise from the hole in the ice behind Mark. It wasn't human, not entirely. Its limbs were too long, its eyes too wide, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Run!" I screamed, but the ice cracked beneath me as I stood. Mark didn't move fast enough. The thing lunged, its skeletal hands dragging him into the freezing water. His scream was cut short as the lake swallowed him whole. Eric and I bolted, the ice groaning and splintering beneath our feet. I didn't dare look back, not even when I heard the sound of something crawling out of the water, its nails scraping against the ice. We made it back to the truck, slamming the doors and peeling out of there as fast as Eric's truck could go. We never went back to that lake. Mark's body was never found. I spend most of my waking hours caring for my elderly grandmother who suffers from Alzheimer's disease, which has taken increasingly more and more from her. I don't do anything requiring advanced medical knowledge. A nurse comes by the house twice a week to help with that sort of stuff. I have zero medical training other than a CPR course I took a few months ago in case of an emergency, but something tells me that I am already forgetting the basics with each passing day. I don't mind taking care of her. My grandma took me in when I was 11 years old after my father and mother split. Neither of them really wanted a child. That was evident from the beginning. I think my mother loved me, but she was never fit to raise a kid, and she knew it. My father, on the other hand, was never fit to be around children, let alone take care of one himself. He was always in and out of jail. Before my grandmother took me in, my fondest childhood memories were when my dad was doing time. Things weren't so bad when it was just my mother and me. But whenever he returned from his imprisonment, things would always end up falling apart again. When my parents finally did divorce, I was about as dejected as a child could be. The bright beam of childhood innocence had long since faded from my eyes. That all changed when I went to live with my grandma. Her house was clean and big and had an acre of land. I had a room to myself and more than 2 changes of clothes. I thought we must have been rich. Raising me increased her financial burden, but she never let it show on her face. That woman always had a smile on. I wish that smile would come back. Ever since the disease started taking a firm hold on her, she mostly just stares. She allows me to take care of her on the good days, and we spend quality time enjoying novels and her black and white TV shows. On the bad days, she won't let me help at all. I don't quite understand what sets her off, but some days she wakes up paranoid and scared. Day 1, Sunday. My alarm went off at 5:55 a.m. What the hell, I thought. I always set my alarm for 9 a.m. Although many old people enjoy waking up earlier than the sun, my grandma will sleep all day if I let her. I usually start my day at 9, get myself ready, make breakfast, and then get grandma out of bed around 10. So why was my alarm going off at 5:55? I turned it off and rolled over, trying to fall back asleep. But before I could, I heard a crash from upstairs. I live in the basement, and grandma lives in the master bedroom on the main floor. I rushed out of my room and up the stairs as quickly as possible. Was grandma hurt? Did she fall? What was she doing out of bed? My mind was racing. When I reached the top of the stairs, I expected to see my grandmother somewhere on the floor, but instead I saw an empty living room. The sun hadn't come up yet, making the room barely visible. I peered into the master bedroom and found grandma still fast asleep. I closed the door slowly, trying not to wake her. With grandma safe in her room, I decided to check the house to see if I could locate the source of the crashing sound. The kitchen looked normal except for a knife in the sink, which I was pretty sure I had cleaned and put away the night before. Next, I checked the living room and found a book on the floor. I keep the house pretty tidy so that grandma doesn't trip over anything, so it was definitely odd to find the book in the middle of the room. I picked it up and opened it. It was a scrapbook, one of the many my grandmother had put together over the years. This one mainly consisted of photos of my mother when she was young. Closing the book, I walked a few feet to the bookshelf and returned it, where dust had revealed its usual resting place. I still felt a little groggy, and with my tired mind, I rationalized that my grandma had been looking at it earlier and left it on the floor without me realizing it. That's the thing about the human mind. We will do anything to rationalize the unexplainable. Remembering it was still early, and I had about 3 hours before I needed to get on with my day, I snuck out of the house for a quick run. I don't typically leave my grandmother unattended, but she wouldn't wake up for a while, and it was nice to get some time to myself. I returned to the house half an hour later. Stepping into the bathroom, I got a text from my girlfriend Jane. She works at a bakery and always texts me when she heads off to work, though I usually don't reply for a couple of hours because, like I said before, I'm never up this early. The text read, "Good morning, Paul. I'm leaving for work, but maybe I can swing by later and hang out for a bit." I smiled and decided I'd surprise her by texting back immediately, "Have fun at work, I love you." "Wow, you're up early," she replied. Yeah, I got woken up by a loud noise and decided to get a jump start on my day. I left out the part about my alarm going off 3 hours early. When it was time to wake up Grandma, I went into her bedroom softly and turned on the light. But to my surprise, Grandma was already awake. She sat at the foot of her bed staring at me, not with her usual blank stare, but a fearful one. "Hey, Grandma, what's wrong?" I asked. She didn't reply. She just kept staring at me. I decided to give her some privacy after making sure she was safe. I went to the kitchen to make some breakfast. As I glanced into the sink, ready to wash the knife I had forgotten about the night before, it was gone. I figured I was tired when I noticed it earlier and was probably mistaken. There is a window above the kitchen sink which gives a beautiful view of the lawn. As I stared out, a bluebird flew by and rested on the back porch. The beautiful bird looked almost out of place in our little backyard. I had never seen a bird like it in our area. When I turned around, I almost jumped out of my skin to see my grandmother an inch from my face. "Geez, Grandma." My fear quickly turned to laughter as I chuckled. "Granny, you nearly scared me half to death. Are you feeling any better?" She still had that scared and angry look on her face. It was almost as if... "Hey, Grandma," I said nervously. "You know who I am, right? It's me, Paul. Your grandson quietly," she said without taking her eyes off me. "There's someone in the house." A feeling of awful guilt spread over me as I told her, "No, Grandma, you know me. I live here with you, remember?" Her anger turned to disappointment. She leaned closer to my face and, in a hushed tone, whispered, "No, Paul. I know who you are. I am telling you that there is someone in our house." My heart sank, and the guilty pit in my stomach became a sinkhole of fear. "Where? Grandma, where did you see this person? My God, are they still here?" I instantly believed her, as I always have, but then, for a moment, I thought, is this the disease? Is she seeing things now? I didn't remember the doctor saying anything about hallucinations. I pushed the thoughts out of my head. I reached for my phone to dial 911, but Grandma put her hand on mine before I could unlock it. "He's in my room." She said it almost as if it was an afterthought. My heart raced, and without thinking, I picked her up and shuffled towards the front door. Once outside, I sat her on the porch bench. "Stay here," I said. She wasn't looking me in the eyes. I rushed back into the house and to her bedroom. The door was shut. I went to reach for the handle, but I stopped. Adrenaline had gotten me this far, but it seemed to run dry when it came time to investigate. What would I even do if I found someone in there, I thought. But I needed to make sure that we were safe. I slowly turned the knob and pushed my way inside. Everything looked normal, other than a bit of clutter. Hadn't I picked up her room the night before? I checked everywhere, but there was no sign of anyone. I felt relieved and almost smiled at how worked up I'd been. That feeling soon left me as I remembered the master bathroom with its door still shut. I flung the door open, but what I saw didn't scare me. It was confusing. The walls, the mirror, the floor, all of it. It was all covered in a black sludge. The smell reminded me of the many hot summer days I spent walking the empty road as a kid. It was the smell of tar and tobacco. After standing in shock for what must have been minutes, I checked the rest of the house but found nothing. I walked outside to find Grandma still on the bench. Her attention had turned to a small pile of ants on the concrete. "Hey, Grandma, I checked the house. There's no one there." She didn't reply. "Did something happen in the bathroom? What is all that stuff?" Still no reply. I wasn't totally convinced that there had been an intruder, but I also wasn't totally convinced my grandma had made the mess herself. The rest of the day passed by quickly. Grandma hadn't said a word to me since the incident, but honestly, I didn't really have time for conversation anyway. Cleaning the sludge was nearly impossible. It took me well into the afternoon to clear away the black stain. The tar was warm to the touch initially, but soon completely dried, making it hard and resistant to my efforts. I didn't even realize what time it was when I heard a knock at the door. Jane. I ran to the door and opened it to see her face beaming at me. "Jane, I'm so sorry, I forgot you were coming over." She looked disappointed. "Oh, sorry, do you want me to leave? I should have texted to remind you I was coming." "No, please come in, I'm sorry, I just feel bad that I haven't showered or made dinner or anything. I've been so busy today." "How's Grandma doing?" she asked. "It's been a bad day for her today." She knew what I meant. I had often confided in her about Grandma's previous bad days. She knew from interacting with Grandma how quiet and off she could seem when her mind wasn't at its best. "Aw, Granny," she said, turning a sympathetic face to Grandma. She really did love my Grandma. We ordered Chinese food, and I told Jane about the day's events. "That's so weird," she said between bites of orange chicken. "Where do you think she got the black stuff?" "I don't know, I'm not even 100% sure it was her. I mean, who knows, maybe someone was in our house. I did notice a few things out of place." We sat silently for a few seconds. We turned our attention to the black and white film we had put on for Grandma, and soon the night started to feel like any other. When the movie ended, I tucked Grandma into bed. Jane and I turned on a show with actual color and cuddled on the couch. Day 2. Monday, my alarm woke me up at 5:55 a.m. I looked at my phone, puzzled that it had happened twice. Before I had time to go back to bed, a loud bang from upstairs startled me. This sound was much louder than the one the day before. I barreled up the stairs and peered into Grandma's room. She was asleep. Stepping back into the living room, I found the same scrapbook on the floor. I started turning on all the lights. Once the room was well lit, I opened the scrapbook. A sinister feeling crept into my bones as I flipped through page after page. Every picture that included my mother had been ruined, her face cut from each photo. I called the police, and the operator said they would be there as soon as possible. I was convinced that there had been someone in the house. While waiting for the police, I woke up Grandma and walked her out to my car, where she sat while I looked the house over. In the 6 minutes it took for the police to arrive, I noticed a drawer open in the kitchen. I also found more black goo in the garage. The police walked through the house, checking every place a person could hide. They didn't find anyone, and there was no evidence of forced entry. "Sounds like someone might be looking to hurt your mom, seeing as her face was cut out of all the pictures," said the officer. "Well, if someone had it out for her, they had the wrong house. We haven't seen her in nearly 17 years, I replied. The officers offered to check up on us later tonight to make sure there wasn't anyone lurking around the property, and said to call again if there were any further disturbances. "Thanks, officers," I said. I ushered Grandma back into the house as they pulled out of the driveway. "You all right, Grandma?" I asked. No response. We stepped into the living room, and I was helping her sit on the couch when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I turned to face the kitchen window. That same bluebird from the day before was staring right at me. The bird was so beautiful, but looking at it I couldn't help but feel like I was in some sort of danger, like a bad omen. It continued to stare for a few moments and then flew away. The day dragged on. Grandma hadn't said a word. Worse, she hadn't even looked me in the eyes. I was worried. The sun dipped over the horizon and suddenly it was night. Time to put Grandma to bed. As I helped her get comfortable, she looked at me. It was a welcome surprise, and I smiled at her, but she didn't smile back. She only whispered the words, "Someone is in the kitchen." Ice went down my spine. "What?" "Grandma, we were both just in there and I didn't see anybody." She looked terrified. Obviously, my words were of no comfort to her. She just repeated, "In the kitchen, the kitchen, kitchen." Then she rolled over, closed her eyes, and stopped speaking. She was really starting to make me worried, and I really couldn't decide whether to believe her or not. I left the room and headed for the kitchen. Upon arrival, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary right away, other than the drawer with the bags and wrap. It was open again. I turned to walk out and turned the light off, but the room didn't get dark. I flicked the switch on and off, but the room remained illuminated. In fact, it was getting brighter. Panicked, I did the first thing that came to my mind and reached for the big knife in the knife block. But I froze when I noticed the knife block was empty. Sweat washed over me, and I saw all the knives in the sink. The room continued to illuminate brighter and brighter as I dashed for a knife and cut myself on one of the smaller blades before finally grabbing hold of the bread knife. My attention briefly turned to my bloody hand as I attempted to wrap a rag around the wound. Just then, the room went completely quiet, and I saw it. A large figure, maybe 8 feet tall. The creature was completely naked except for a plastic film, plastic wrap, covering it from head to toe. The light emanating from the figure seemed to give me tunnel vision, blurring my surroundings. I couldn't make out the face as it was completely masked in the plastic wrapping, but there was a protrusion where the nose was underneath. Petrified, I felt my blood run cold. I was so scared that I was physically unable to move. The dread filled me like molasses in a glass, slowing my thoughts. I dropped the knife, which crashed to the tile floor with a metallic clang. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like stone. I stared in horror at the bright monster, and just when I thought it might attack, it began to speak. Fear not, sweet boy. Its voice sounded frail and weak, as if trying to convince me I was safe. It reminded me how an old person might talk to a child, almost mimicking their innocent tone. It continued to speak. Sweet Paul. Sweet Paul. Who are you? I managed to say in a shaky voice. Sweet Paul, I am your guardian angel. Your guide in the darkness, your friend from above. I wasn't convinced. An angel? This thing looked demonic. It was the stuff of my nightmares. Okay, well, I'm good actually. I don't need a guardian angel. The angel began breathing heavily, and in a much deeper voice than before it said, Yes, my sweet boy, you do. Just then the knives in the sink flew straight up in the air and stuck into the ceiling. The noise startled me, and I turned to see the knives dangling. With my eyes briefly off the creature, I immediately heard footsteps running toward me. I screamed and turned back to face the monster. Raising my arms to shield my face, I braced for impact, but it never came. I opened my eyes to a dark, empty room. It was gone, and I was all alone. I quickly flipped on the light and grabbed my phone to call Jane. It went straight to voicemail. She must have been asleep. With no one to talk to, I paced around my room until exhaustion took its toll, and I went to bed. Day 3. Tuesday. The next day, my alarm went off at 5:55 a.m. This time I was ready. I bolted up the stairs before any noise alerted me to action, hoping to catch the creature who had been terrorizing us. I started my investigation by checking on Grandma. Asleep. Good, I thought as I shut the door and turned my attention to the rest of the house. The first thing I noticed was the scrapbook on the floor, with its pages torn out and strewn across the floor. I needed to clean that up before my grandmother had a chance to see the pitiful state of her treasured photo album, but that would have to wait until I scoured the rest of the house. Next, I went to the kitchen. Nothing looked too out of the ordinary, but I noticed that one knife remained stuck to the ceiling while the rest had fallen to the ground. I was about to check the rest of the house when I heard a loud slam coming from the basement. The noise was louder than the previous days, and I was sure it had woken Grandma, so I decided to check on her again before investigating. Just as I suspected, Grandma was sitting upright when I walked through the door. She hadn't turned to look at me when I walked in. "You okay, Grandma?" I asked. I wasn't expecting a response since she had been nearly mute the past few days. Despite my expectations, she answered immediately. "It's okay, Paul. They can't hurt us today. Hank will protect us." Hank was the name of my grandfather, who had been dead for over 20 years. I didn't have the heart to remind her of his passing, so I said nothing and walked towards the stairs. As I took the first step down, the loud banging noise repeated, sending a chill down my spine. I went to take the next step but stood frozen for several seconds. I managed to break through my terror and continue my plunge to the basement. Other than my room, there are 2 other rooms downstairs. A guest bedroom and a family room which had slowly morphed into my personal man cave over the years. The sound happened a 3rd time, and it was clearing coming from the family room. I peeked my head through the door but quickly shot back behind the wall. I had expected to see my not-so-angelic guardian angel, but crouched in the middle of the room was something far worse. It was bigger than the angel, maybe 10 feet tall. It had to slouch just to fit in the room. Instead of light, the creature emanated a blinding darkness, which seemed to be battling for space with the soft light of the moon coming through the window. Its hands were disproportionately large for its body, with long, bony fingers. The most notable characteristic of the monster was what was covering its body. From head to toe, the creature was soaked in hot black sludge, which dripped down to the floor. The chemical smell was overwhelmingly potent, and I found myself struggling not to gag as I sat still and listened to the beast breathe. I shifted my weight, preparing to take another look. Before I could peer around the corner, the monster screamed, which sounded like the mix of a man and a dog. I booked it to the staircase, looking behind me, only to watch as the creature tumbled toward me with impressive speed. I reached the top of the stairs and almost ran for the front door when I remembered Grandma, who was still in her room. Thinking quickly, I leaped behind the island counter in the middle of the kitchen and hid myself, trying to make as little sound as I could. I heard the tar monster reach the top of the stairs and pause. Thankfully, it didn't know where I was, but soon began searching for me. I caught a glimpse of it as its back was turned to me, and I noticed it was carrying something large. "Is that a rug?" I thought to myself. Then I recognized it. The thing was carrying my rug from underneath my coffee table. What on earth does it want with that? I turned my attention back to my hiding place and scanned for a weapon. As my eyes darted around the kitchen, I became transfixed on the window, or rather what was behind the window. A little bluebird. Just then, I heard something crash against the floor and I spun around. The creature was gone and my rug lay rolled up in the living room. The rest of the day felt foggy. My head was aching, and no amount of acetaminophen could dull the throbbing. Grandma stayed in her room, not letting me in other than to bring her meals and make sure she was taking her medication. By the time night rolled around, I was ready to call it a day, but Jane came over for dinner, and her contagious, unending energy started to rub off on me. "So what did you do today? Find any more objects in weird places?" she asked innocently. I had almost forgotten that I hadn't told her about the bizarre monsters I'd been seeing. I thought about keeping it to myself, but I could never lie to her. We had been friends since elementary school and together since high school. She was the one person on earth I expected to believe my story. So I told her about the tar monster and the plastic angel from the night before. When I finished, she stared at me with her jaw open. "Oh my goodness, Paul. This is just like that show Ghost Adventure or something." She had a huge smile on her face, which was not the reaction I was expecting. Maybe not just like Ghost Adventures, but it is pretty freaky," I said. "We should set up some cameras and catch them the next time they appear. We could be famous or something." She really did seem genuinely excited about the idea. "I'd like to see how excited you are when they appear in your kitchen," I shot back, now smiling myself. "It's okay, Paul, I'll stay the night to protect you," she offered. "Don't you work in the morning?" I asked. "Nope, we're closed tomorrow, silly." I didn't say it, but I was actually extremely relieved to not have to spend the night alone. I started to get seriously terrified of my own home. Well, it settled then. I told her, "You can deal with the big evil monsters, and I will get some much-needed beauty sleep." The rest of the night actually felt normal. We watched a horror movie at Jane's request. What is it with her and this spooky shit? And went to bed. I had this really weird dream that night about my mom. In the dream, I was young, maybe 7 or 8, and was helping her mop the kitchen. She showed me how to fill the bucket with water and how much cleaner to pour in. She handed me the mop and said, "Give it a try." I was so eager to help, I nearly tripped over the mop as I swished it from side to side. We were cleaning up something wet, and I figured maybe I had spilled some grape soda again. "And then you dip it into the water again," she told me. I plunged the mop into the bucket and was about to pull it back out when I saw the water turn a light red color. Confused, I looked at the ground I had just mopped and was horrified to see that the liquid I had been smearing around the tile was a thick, shimmering pool of blood. I screamed and looked up at my mother for her to comfort me, but I stumbled backward over the bucket when I saw her. As I lay soaked in soap, water, and blood, I watched my mom stare at me with the biggest smile. Her head was bleeding. I shot up in bed, free from the nightmare. I must have been gasping for air because Jane sat up as well and started rubbing my back. Hey, what's the matter?" she asked. Catching my breath, I started to laugh a bit as I said, "I just had the weirdest, most morbid dream of my life. I was a kid and my mom was letting me help with chores, but she was bleeding everywhere, and I think that she was going to die." Jane continued to comfort me and said, "That is weird. Your mom is fine though, right? I mean, as far as we know." To be honest, I wasn't sure how my mom was doing. The last time I saw her was just before she went to rehab when I was 8. From that time forward, I only communicated with her through letters. When I was 13, the letters stopped. "I'm sure she's okay," I said, more to reassure myself than Jane. We went back to sleep, and I didn't have any more dreams that night. Day 4, Wednesday. My alarm woke Jane and me up at 5:55 a.m. "Why did you set the alarm so early?" she asked, pulling a pillow over her ears. I turned off the alarm. "I didn't set it. It's just been doing that. There should be a loud sound, kind of like banging, in a minute or two." We sat in complete silence, waiting for something to happen. About 10 minutes passed, and I started to feel relieved. "Maybe nothing will happen today," I said. Moments later, we heard a scream coming from upstairs. "Granny!" Jane shouted as the two of us sprang into action. I stumbled on the stairs but recovered quickly as I bear-crawled the rest of my way up with tremendous speed. When I reached Grandma's door, Jane was close behind me. I burst through the door and looked side to side for my grandmother. She was gone. I ran to her bed and checked underneath, but there was nothing. We searched everywhere, the closet, the bathroom, the kitchen, everywhere. She had just vanished. "Call the police. I'm going to drive around the neighborhood in case she left the house," I shouted. Jane began dialing 911 and I heard her give the operator the address as I left the house. I spent the next 15 minutes driving up and down the roads close to home, but there was no sign of my grandma. Jane texted me that the police had arrived and I returned to the house. The police rechecked the house and talked to someone on their radio about having all officers on the lookout for a wandering and confused elderly woman. I explained to them that her scream sounded frightened and that I thought she might have been taken. They listened to me explain as much as I could without making me sound crazy, and when I had finished my story, they told me the most likely scenario was that she had left the house on her own. I didn't try to argue. I knew how my story must have sounded, and there was nothing I could say to get them to believe me. On top of that, I wanted them to be correct. If Grandma were out on her own, as dangerous as that would be, it would be better than being taken. The officers left the house to search for Grandma. While they drove away, I held Jane, who was sobbing into my shirt. The rest of the day, Jane and I drove around town looking for her. When we would get tired of driving, we would go back to the house and search there again. We repeated this cycle until it started to get dark, and we decided to try again the next day and allow the police to do their jobs. We remained in contact with them throughout the day, but they turned up nothing. I was devastated, and I felt like crying, but I had held back the tears all day. I was not afraid to cry in front of Jane, but I felt like I needed all my energy to go toward finding Grandma. I couldn't waste any time crying. While at home, Jane passed out on the couch, exhausted from the emotionally taxing day. I stayed up on my computer creating a flyer to put up around town the next day. I kept my phone ringer on so I would get all updates from the police. Eventually, I started to drift off while sitting upright on my chair. I felt the world getting fuzzy as my eyelids slowly fell, fluttering back open a few times and falling again. I was seconds away from total unconsciousness when I heard a voice whisper, "You don't remember, do you, sweet boy?" I jolted awake to find the plastic angel peering its head from behind the sofa that Jane was sleeping on. Its long fingers wrapped around the back of the couch. Jane, I managed to squeak out. "Jane, wake up." She didn't move. I knew she was a deep sleeper, but come on, Jane. You need to remember. The angel's voice was shrill, like nails on a chalkboard. "Remember what?" I asked. "You need to remember Paul. You were young. Your mind was easily molded, but it was not the truth." The angel began inching toward me as it continued. "You need to see what you were forced to forget." When the angel had reached my chair, it slowly lifted its pointer finger, which began to glow brighter than any light I had ever seen. The finger landed on my forehead, and I fell into a deep sleep. 17 years ago. When I was 8, my parents fought a lot. One summer, when my father finished his 3rd stint in prison, he returned home to find that my mother was not conducting their finances the way she had before he went away. She spent more money on groceries and less on pills. She bought me new shoes and even took me to the movies once. This caused them to fight to no end. Whenever they would argue, I would sit outside our mobile home on a concrete slab and wait for it to be over. One day I sat out in the sweltering sun and played with a group of ants that found a small splash of grape soda I had spilled. I let them crawl on my fingers and then back to the hot ground. The air was wet, making it hard to swallow. The yelling from inside became unbearably loud, so I stood up and began walking. I didn't know where I was walking to. I just wanted to be somewhere safe. After about a half-mile of wandering aimlessly, I saw a girl sitting on a tire swing that hung from a solitary tree. I tried not to make eye contact because I was 8 and girls were icky. As I was walking past, she called out to me, "Hey, kid." Shocked, I turned to see her with a warm smile on her face from ear to ear. "Hi," I replied sheepishly. "Could you push me? I'm not very good at pumping my legs." I felt a little weird about it, but I didn't really have anything else to do. I decided to comply since pushing a girl on a swing seemed more interesting than walking. "What's your name?" she asked. "Paul," I said, warming up to her more and more by the minute. "What's your name?" I asked. "Jane," she said matter-of-factly. We played for around an hour and I decided it was probably time to head back home. My parents didn't like when I was gone for long. After that day, every time my parents would fight, I'd walk over to Jane's house and we'd push each other on the old tire swing. On one particularly rainy day, my parents began to get into another one of their heated arguments. I put on my rain boots and was about to go to my room to get my coat in hopes I could meet up with Jane. Maybe we could find some big puddles to splash in, I thought. As I trotted over to my bedroom, I heard my mother scream. It wasn't a scream out of anger. That wouldn't have been novel enough to catch my attention. It was a scream of pain. I ran into the kitchen where I saw my mother holding her face, which was quickly turning a dark color. My father was standing over her with rage in his eyes. Fear held me in its grasp. I wanted to turn, to run. But the fear held me in place, staring at the violent scene before me. Wide eyes filling with tears, I looked at my mother, then at my father, and back at my mother. My dad looked at me and shouted, "You see, Paul? This is what happens when you step out of line." I was paralyzed. I wanted to help my mother. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay. I wanted to hurt my father for hurting her. But most of all, I wanted to scream. I wanted to scream so badly, but I couldn't. All that came out was a sob. My crying only made my father angrier. He took a step towards me, but my mother shot up off the ground like lightning and lashed at him, screaming, "Stay away from him, you monster!" My dad shoved her off and went to hit her again, but my lungs finally released the death grip they had held on my oxygen, and I screamed, "Stop it!" This caught him off guard, and as he turned to face me, my mother jumped to her feet once more and rushed to the knife block, pulling out the biggest one. Before she had a chance to use it, my father grabbed her from behind and threw her down. Her head slammed the counter on her way to the floor. With a thud, she landed on the ground. She lay motionless as a pool of blood formed around her. "Oh shit!" my dad yelled. He started grabbing at her head in a feeble attempt to stop the bleeding. "No, no, no, no." His voice trailed off. As I watched this unfold, my vision became blurry, and my peripheral vision began fading out, locking my gaze on the crimson stream flooding from my mother's skull. We sat in silence. Minutes passed, then an hour. I didn't dare say a word. I couldn't. There was nothing in my 8-year-old mind that could understand what had happened. My mother never woke up. When my father finally composed himself, he stood up off the ground and began rummaging through drawers in the kitchen. After a minute of searching, he found what he was looking for. He dropped to his knees next to my mother with a package of plastic wrap in his hands. He lifted her head a few inches and carefully wrapped the plastic around her head. He was thorough, making sure the blood couldn't continue to drip from her wound. Once he was satisfied with his patch-up job, my mother looked like a shiny mannequin. He laid her head back down and left the room, returning a moment later with the rug from under our coffee table. He wrapped her tightly. He snapped at me to grab the mop, and soon I was cleaning the kitchen floor. I had to stand up to avoid him as he dragged my mother out of the kitchen and through the front door. He latched the deadbolt behind him, and a moment later, I heard the ignition of his truck. Peering out the window, I watched him drive away. He didn't come back for several hours. The whole time he was gone, I stayed in my corner of the kitchen, curled into a ball. The evening turned to night. Eventually, I fell asleep on the kitchen tile. I awoke when he returned, walking in slowly. I looked at the digital clock on the stove. 5:55 a.m. He was sweaty and tired and wore a look of sadness on his face. He took a shower, got dressed, and then called me into the living room. I did as I was told and shuffled my little feet until I found myself sitting on the couch next to the man who had raised me. He was quiet for a while and seemed to be lost in thought. He looked at me and said, "Polly, you know Mommy had to go away for a little bit, right?" I looked at him, confused. He continued, "Mom has been fighting some tough battles these past few months. She used a lot of drugs. You know she uses drugs, don't you?" I nodded. I had seen her on many occasions, high as she would lay in bed for what seemed like days. I said nothing as he thought for a minute before telling me, "Mom had to go somewhere to get help. A rehab center. It's kind of like a hospital." The more he spoke, the less I understood. "But she was bleeding. Where did you take her?" I felt more lost than I had ever felt. "No, Paul," he said sternly. "She wasn't bleeding." But you," I stammered. "No, Paul, no," he shouted. "Mom is fine, she just had to go away for a while." He sounded really frustrated. "She had to go away," he reiterated. "So when someone asks you where your mom is, what do you tell them?" He was looking me right in the eyes now. I thought for a minute. "I'd tell them she had to go away for a while." Yes, Paul, that's right." He buried my face in his chest as he forced an embrace. "That's right, son. Mom just had to go away for a little while, and that's all we know." When he left the room, I sat there a little longer before standing shakily to my feet and walking out the front door. I sat on the wet concrete slab, unsure if I should cry. I was so confused. I really wasn't sure what had happened, but I wanted to believe my father. If he were telling the truth, then Mom would be okay. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still loomed overhead. Just then I heard a quiet tap on the concrete beside me. I turned my head to see the most beautiful blue bird. I awoke drenched in sweat. I was in the living room chair where I had been before the angel had touched me. Jane was still curled up on the couch. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was 5:50 a.m. Day 5. Thursday. When my alarm went off at 5:55 a.m., I silenced it and woke Jane up. "What's going on?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "We have to hide. This is when it always happens." Confused but terrified, she sat up and began looking around. "Where should we hide?" She was starting to sound panicked, and I wanted to comfort her, but to be honest, I was scared shitless. "The pantry!" I exclaimed, pointing towards the kitchen. We scrambled to the door and hid inside just before a booming sound stopped us in our tracks. Just as we closed the door, we heard a blood-curdling roar coming from the basement. We held each other tightly, neither of us daring to breathe too loudly. Pounding. Footsteps pounded up the stairs as the hate-filled roars continued. Through the slits in the pantry door, I could see a large black personage launch itself from the top step into the living room. Black sludge spilling onto all surfaces as it frantically searched around the room. It carried my rolled-up rug from the basement. This time it looked a little thicker. The creature slammed the rug onto the floor of the living room, and with a scream it fled down the stairs on all fours. After a few moments, we ventured outside the pantry. We couldn't hear the monster anymore, and we panted back the oxygen we had lost while holding our breath. Frantically, I ran to the living room. I needed to see what was inside that rug. Something in my gut told me it would be the decayed body of my mother. But when I opened it up, she wasn't inside. Instead was my sweet grandma, still and cold. I let out a sob. Tears streamed from my face, and I began performing CPR. 30 chest compressions and 2 breaths, I remembered. But it wasn't enough. My grandmother, the woman who had raised me most of my life, the only caretaker who ever gave me any sense of stability, lay dead on the floor of our living room. At the funeral a few days later, Jane held me as we cried together. I was a mess. I had never felt the sting of death quite like this before. I had been to funerals before, and they were sad. But this was different. Death didn't just take a life from me, it took my whole heart. Could I really say that death took my grandmother? Sure, death might have been waiting in the wings, but what took her was my past. If I had remembered what my father had done to my mother sooner, would all of this have been bypassed? Did it take the loss of my dear matriarch to deliver the truth? These are questions that I don't think will ever be graced with answers. Everything ended the night my grandmother was taken from me. As they readied the casket to be lowered, a small blue bird perched near the head of the grave. It seemed to bow its head in reverence. Walking back to our car, Jane broke the silence. "I haven't smoked in years, but I think I'll need a cigarette today. You want one?" She pulled out a pack that I didn't even know she bought. "No thanks," I replied. "My dad used to smoke 2 packs a day." I have been worried about him for a little while now, but I didn't think it was such a big deal as it's turned out to be. Really, I still don't know that I would have reached out if it wasn't for our kid. I guess it all started a few months back. My husband, I'll call him James, and I had had a bit of an argument. This wasn't super abnormal, but I do admit that I think I took it a little bit too far this time. We've been working on it, but this was one of those times where your emotions just take over before your brain can, you know? But we were fighting again, and I said what I said, and he left. This actually was weird. He's never just up and left before, and I felt this pain in my chest right after the car left the driveway. After a few hours, I tried to call him. At the time, I let it go, figuring he was just mad at me still. Hell, I'm still mad at myself for it. Maybe then things would be different. A few days passed, and I tried calling him again and again and again. Every single time, my phone would ring for a few minutes and then go to voicemail. On day 4 or 5, I don't quite remember, it started to go straight to voicemail. I still almost wondered if he was actually going to leave me this time and was just ghosting me, but we're married, so it's not like that's really an option, right? So, I finally gave in and called one of his friends. He actually did pick up, so James probably hadn't gone to him, I figured. We talked for a second, and I came clean about what happened. I told him how I was scared now. It had been almost a week since I'd even heard from my husband, How could I not be? The friend hadn't seen him either. My heart sank. I tried a few more of his close friends, and there was still nothing. I even called James again to leave another voicemail in hopes he was just screening my calls. Still, nothing. I think that was when I stopped sleeping, too. Nothing was working. I laid awake every single night knowing that if the love of my life turned up dead, there would be nobody to blame but me. I would have to break the news to our daughter, and she would hate me even more than I already hated myself, all over a stupid fucking argument. I filed a missing persons report 2 days later. The only reason I'd waited that long even was because of the argument, honestly. He was a grown man, he could absolutely handle himself. He's tall, over 6 feet. And strong too. It's not like an attacker could take him down very easily. If something did happen, I knew I'd be suspect number one, and admitting that we'd been fighting would only make me look more suspicious. But I just couldn't bear to think of my husband really, actually being dead. So I reported it. Another week passed, but they did find him. Thank God, they never did find our vehicle, but he was safe, so there wasn't anything I could really complain about. Cars are replaceable, a husband and father is not. I've never wanted to have to replace him. I've never wanted to replace him until now. All of that is just backstory for right now. He's been back and living with us now for about a month, but something about him is just so wrong. I don't even really know how to explain it. I think the first thing I noticed were his eyes. I can feel them on me constantly now. Hell, I feel them even now as I relate this. Even though he's out of the house, a luxury now becoming more and more rare. They're so sharp. It's not that usual feeling of being watched, like if he were checking me out or just observing what I was doing. It's like he's physically trying to see through me, like he's tearing through my skin with just his eyes. Initially, I did just think I was going crazy or that he was mad at me, but I can hardly pry him from me now. I used to pretend to sleep at night for extra time to cuddle with James, but now I fake sleeping to roll away from him instead. If I get up to do the dishes, he gets up and follows me and is entirely wrapped around me. I feel like I shouldn't mind this, but it's just so different from our norm that I can't shake that feeling that something here isn't right. I feel like he's just going to surgically attach himself to me at some point to keep me closer to him. Or like one night he'll unveil a mass of tentacles or excess limbs and just never let me go. So far there haven't even been any signs of this, thankfully. He looks the same as he used to. But there's still just something about him that's not right. Maybe his face looks more sullen. Is that the right word? Or he just looks tired, I don't know. But I swear that there's something different. I think that it might be his eyes too, if it's not just his face. It's almost like they don't shine anymore. There's no life in his expressions, like he doesn't use his eyes the way he used to. It's just soulless staring now. I miss the way he used to look at me, even if we were fighting. I'll happily take a glare or side-eye over the nothingness I've got right now. Again, though, he's just so clingy. He's been showering with me, which he's just never done before. He usually showers in the morning while I do at night. He sits outside of the bathroom and scratches at the door like some sort of dog whenever I lock him out. It's weird. I don't know if other couples are like that, but we never have been, and I certainly hate it now. Even our daughter can tell that something is off. She turns to give me weird looks when James isn't looking. She's started to cling to me too. I can't imagine what she's feeling right now, really. She's quite young, so I'm not even sure if she fully understands what's happening, but she's clearly put off by it too. Her once kind and loving father now almost acts like he doesn't fully know who she is. I don't actually think he's said her name since he's been back, now that I stop to think about it. Those two used to be inseparable. God, I feel so terrible for her. Then there's his midnight activities. I don't know if that's the right word, but I suppose it works. Every night he's been getting up and just leaving our bed. I don't know if he's got an actual schedule for it, but it's always sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. I don't think he knows that I'm even awake when he does it. He just gets up and goes into the house for a few hours, then he comes back around when I wake up. 2 nights ago, I got curious about it. I lied in wait, and sure enough, he was out of bed at the same time he is every night. I waited a little bit longer. I couldn't get myself out of bed for a second, and I didn't want to just pop up and follow him right out the gate. I counted as each second passed and gave him a few minutes. Finally, I pulled myself up and tiptoed into the ball to find him, and find him I did. I kept myself tucked in the hallway and peered around the corner at him. He was stood in our kitchen, leaned over a bubbling pot. I don't know what was in it. but I'm also not sure if I actually want to know at this point. Maybe he'll kill me and I'll finally be free of this whole thing. I took one more step, only barely touching the kitchen floor. There was a snapping sound as his head spun around to look at me. He looked at me at a somewhat odd angle, too. Part of me wonders how he didn't snap his own neck. A second later, his body turned towards me as well. It was dark, but the low light from the stove hood reflected off of his eyes. They were wide as he stared me down. He smiled slightly, too. Nothing big and wide like you see in horror movies, but it was enough to make the hair on my neck stand on end. He took a slow, tedious step towards me. I took a step back, pulling both my feet back into the hallway. He took 2 steps now, still just as slow and meticulous as the last one. I found myself completely unable to move, like he'd frozen me in place. My heart was pounding in my ears so loudly that I couldn't even think up a way out. My stomach began to churn. He took 3 more of those steps. On his 3rd step, though, he somehow managed to lose his balance and he nearly tottered to the ground before his foot landed silently onto the wood. He finished his slow walk towards me and put his cold, no, freezing hands onto my face. He was gentle in his touch, and he stroked my cheek softer than a spring breeze before giving me a kiss. He straightened himself up after that, still keeping his soulless and small smile on his face. He then spoke to me and said, "Go back to bed, my name. It's too late for you here." I couldn't think to do anything but listen to him, so I nodded. He turned me around and gave me a little pat on the back before sending me back to our room. I just went in and laid down. I don't want to say it like this, but I'm scared of my husband. He's not been violent with me or our daughter at all yet, but I don't doubt that he's capable of it. I don't know, actually. He doesn't start arguments or even play argue anymore like he used to. I've been thinking of reaching out to his friends again, too, but I don't know if they'll be of any help. I feel so wrong for feeling this way, but I don't know what to do. I blame myself for it all, though. If it weren't for that stupid fight, then I would have my actual husband back. God, I don't know what to do. The doorbell rang. I got up expecting the delivery driver who had called me earlier, asking for directions to my house. It was tucked away in a nearly abandoned part of town, so his confusion wasn't surprising. But when I opened the door, it wasn't the driver. Instead, a man in his 40s stood there, whistling softly, his foot tapping against the porch floor. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about him. His plain clothes, average height, unassuming demeanor. Yet, the longer I looked at him, the stranger he seemed. His face, though perfectly normal, was utterly forgettable. The moment I tried to picture it in my mind, it slipped away like a dream upon waking. He was invisible in the way background characters in a crowd are invisible. "Can I help you?" I asked, puzzled. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied me with calm detachment. Then, without hesitation or the slightest change in expression, he said, "I'm here to kill you." It took me a full 5 seconds to process what I'd just heard. My thoughts raced. Was this a joke? A mistake? Should I laugh, call the police, slam the door, or just run? But the man didn't move, nor did his unnervingly calm expression falter. Instead, he added, "I can explain the details if you want." I stared at him, trying to make sense of the situation. "I hope this is a joke," I said, half laughing, my voice betraying a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "No joke," he said flatly. "I really do want to kill you, but—" He hesitated, mumbling something I couldn't catch. Then he met my eyes again. "Can we sit and talk?" Every instinct screamed at me to shut the door in his face, but something, curiosity, stupidity, made me hesitate. I had only recently moved into this house, a cheap purchase from an elderly couple who had owned it for generations. There wasn't much of value inside, and I figured if he tried anything, I could handle myself. I was fit, and the man seemed unarmed. Still, I wasn't stupid. I kept my phone nearby and slipped a knife up my sleeve before inviting him in. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. I kept my eyes on him, my muscles taut, ready to spring into action if needed. He didn't seem in a hurry, though. For a while, he just sat there, staring at the floor, as if lost in thought. Finally, I broke the silence. "So, what's going on?" He looked up, adjusting his posture like he was about to deliver a lecture. "I'm a genie," he said simply. I couldn't help but snort. "A genie, huh? So, how does this work? Do I get 3 wishes?" He didn't react to my sarcasm. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and said, "Let me explain. Maybe it'll make sense." He paused as though deciding where to begin. Then he continued, "Genies aren't what you think. We're not magical blue blobs granting impossible wishes. We're beings who can communicate with our past selves." He glanced at me, gauging my reaction, but I just raised an eyebrow. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. Then, as if making a decision, he snapped his fingers. Everything shifted. I was still in the same room, sitting opposite him, but I wasn't the same. My memories flooded with new details. I wasn't an orphan anymore. I had a family, a sister. Wait, did I have a sister before? My mind reeled. One thing was clear. He wasn't lying. He was a genie. My father had told me about them, hadn't he? No, my grandfather. He'd spent years studying their kind. Genies weren't omnipotent beings. They were terrifyingly practical manipulators of time and causality. My understanding crystallized. Genies couldn't see the future, only the past and present. The future was mutable, constantly shifting. Their power lay in reshaping the past to make the present what it needed to be. Almost like magic. "It's not magic," he said. "It's complicated. Basically, it's science. We exist within the laws of nature, but we follow rules that prevent paradoxes. One of those rules is granting wishes." "Wishes?" I echoed skeptically. He nodded. "If someone asks for money, we don't conjure it out of thin air. We manipulate events in the past to ensure their ancestors make the right choices, meet the right people, take the right opportunities. If someone wants a lost limb back, we prevent the accident from happening in the first place." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "And this has what to do with you killing me?" He sighed, his calm demeanor flickering for the first time. "Someone wished for your death. But here's the problem. When I try to fulfill it, something goes wrong. My future self stops contacting me. It's like I cease to exist." For the first time, I felt a prickle of fear. "And if you don't kill me, then everything is fine," he said. "My future self keeps guiding me, but I don't understand why killing you would change that." He studied me, his gaze sharp. "What's so special about you?" "I have no idea," I said, genuinely baffled. We stayed quiet for a few minutes. "So," I said, "what should I do? How can I help you?" He stopped pacing and turned to me. "You can't. I just wanted to have a conversation." And then, he didn't answer. Instead, he muttered, "Whatever," and snapped his fingers again. The door banged open and two masked men stormed in, guns drawn. My breath caught as they barked orders, forcing me to the ground. My knife slipped from my sleeve and clattered to the floor. One of them noticed and kicked me hard in the stomach, sending me sprawling. "Stay down," he snarled, leveling his gun at me. Then bang. For a split second, pain ripped through me, and then nothing. I opened my eyes. The morning sun streamed through the window. It was quiet, peaceful. I felt oddly refreshed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd forgotten something important. Probably not. Today was the day I was visiting the cemetery to pay respects to my parents. Every single Tuesday for the past 2 years, I have been visited by the same person at the same time, no matter where I am. I worked at a Walmart, so when I saw the same customer every Tuesday, I didn't think anything of it, besides his odd demeanor. A black trench coat, no shoes, messy hair under a bowler hat. His smile was wide, pulling at his cheeks like hooks in the corners of his mouth, and lifeless, decayed eyes. But who in Walmart doesn't look like that? Anyways, one day I had Tuesday off, so I took my dog for a walk in the park near my house, which is across town from the Walmart, and there he was. Again, I couldn't think too much of it besides how odd it is that my dog began barking at him, which he never does. Maybe he just so happens to live in the same neighborhood as I do, and maybe he smelled like another dog. Stupid excuses I would make up to comfort myself. Throughout last year, he has shown up, same time, same day, no matter where I am, Church of God, Church of Satan, Republican rally, Democratic rally, hotel in Texas, on a fucking boat in the goddamn ocean. He will somehow always be wherever I am in the world, every Tuesday at 7:16 p.m. I've tried to speak with him to ask him who he is and how he knows where I am. But every time I try to get close to him, he somehow runs away from me. Disappears in a crowd, outruns my stamina. those are fine. But when he turns the corner and is gone, I can't comprehend it. Even in the ocean, his boat crashed, he was nowhere to be seen. And the next week he was still there with a new boat but the same guy. This year I have still tried to hide from him, but he has been so consistent that some days I just feel defeated. 2 weeks ago I gave up. I waited for him in the park. Sitting on the bench, I felt anxiety pile within me, checking my clock until it finally hit 7:16 p.m. Looking back up from the clock, he was sitting across the park, staring at me. No movement, not even a breath. I wasn't going to chase him anymore or ignore him. I decided to sit and stare back. He twitched, I jumped. He started a very slow walk to me. The anxiety turned into a panic. I couldn't find out what he would do once he caught up to me. I started to back up. He picked up his speed. So did I. His arms began to assist his jogging as his smile seems to have grown wider. I looked away to begin running away. He did too, until I could hear the footsteps trailing mine with less than a second in between. And then nothing. 7:17 p.m. Last week I decided I don't want to meet up with the strange man in the park like an idiot. Instead, I was going to sleep through the entire hour of 7 p.m. I made sure to lock every door and window in the house before I headed to bed. I can never remember my dreams, but this nightmare has been replaying in my head since that night. It was hard to fall asleep, but I would say around 6:50 p.m. I finally drifted off. I didn't know what time it was within my dream, but at 7:16, whatever dream I was going through faded away entirely. There was nothing but him in the distance. In the dream, I squinted my eyes to try to see him better, and I didn't know who it was until I could recognize his smile. Once I did, he began to sprint at me, faster than any animal I have seen run. I couldn't move. I tried. My arms and legs flailed but had no friction to the floor. Looking back, he has cut the distance between us in half, his hands stained in blood, eyes, ears, and nose having streaks of blood falling from them. The struggle to run intensifies. The drum of my heartbeat is all I can hear. I look back as he is jumping in the air. I collapse as he stands above me, blood dripping on my face. His jaw began to unhinge itself as his cheeks tore to his ears, teeth growing in size, tongue retracting back to his throat, eyes rolling in the back of his head, joints cracking as his limbs shifted into impossible positions. Then I woke up. In an attempt to slow my hyperventilating, I coughed up a liquid matching the blood that covered my face. I checked the time to see 7:17 p.m. Once I got a hold of myself, I noticed my door was off its hinges, same with my front door. My dog has disappeared. I'm hoping he ran away through the front door. It's currently noon Tuesday, January 21st of 2025. I have locked myself in my basement with many bear traps between me and the front door, cameras set up in every single room, and enough food and water for the night. But I don't know what to do. I don't want to fall asleep and not have any defense. I brought a shotgun, but I don't know what all that would do. I can't tell the police. They wouldn't believe me. If anything, I would be in more danger with them. They restrain anyone who seems to be going through a psychological episode for their own safety. I'm relating this as a last resort. Maybe someone has met this man before or has any advice on what to do. Please help me or at least keep me company. I don't want to be alone if this is my last day. It's been 4 days I've been stuck here. Stuck in a stupid town that I've stopped trying to figure out the actual location of. I'm not even sure if days is the right word. Time itself doesn't even seem to have logic to it. My phone died on 86%, and every last clock I've seen have some weird symbol that don't even resemble numbers. The sun rises and sets, yes, but yesterday the sun was frozen in the sky for what felt like an eternity. The day before, it went up and down in what I assume was just a few minutes. Same with the moon, too. I'm not even sure how I wound up here. The last thing I remember was sitting in the living room with my sister watching season 2 of Squid Game. My boyfriend called me and I stepped onto the balcony to talk to him. The next thing I knew, I was standing in front of some random movie theater. No flashing light, no buzzing, nothing. I blinked and I was here. After confirming I wasn't hallucinating, I ran around like crazy at first, screaming for anyone. But every store I ran into was deserted. Every store looked just like it should. The grocery store was fully stocked. The clothing stores had plenty on the racks. Even the movie theater had what was clearly freshly popped popcorn. But there wasn't anyone around. Every last thing a town needs is here. Stores, restaurants, houses, a park. There's even a school here, which is even creepier than it sounds. I tried calling 911 at least 100 times before my phone died, way before it should have. Not that it mattered. I didn't have a single bar of signal. I got so desperate I settled on breaking into a car and hot wiring it, but I gave up after I drove for a solid hour and somehow got right back to the outskirts of the town. I broke into a house to stay for the night. I felt guilty at first, seeing all the family photos. I looked closer and they were more like the AI-generated ones, like when you tell ChatGPT to make you an image of a person and it's very nearly realistic, but definitely not it. I've slept here every night. The fridge is fully stocked and the trash is always gone when I wake up, even though I've never taken it out. I've been sleeping with the dresser barricaded against the door as a precaution. I haven't seen a single person since I've been here. Come to think of it, I haven't heard so much as a cricket chirping. I don't do anything all day. The books in this house are all either completely blank or filled in with the same gibberish the clocks have. The computers and TV don't turn on either, even though they look fine. I even checked out other houses too, same story. It's the start of day 5 now. Like every morning, since I do the same thing, get up, try to guess the time based on how high the sun is, and go downstairs for food. The dresser and closet are full of clothes my size, but I refuse to wear them. I've just reached the kitchen when I see an envelope on the island. I'm absolutely certain it wasn't there before. To my horror, the note has one word written on the outside: Lauren. Immediately, my mind starts racing. They know my name? How? Is it the same person who brought me here? Am I here on purpose? Only one way to find out. With my hands trembling, I shakily open the envelope and unfold the surprisingly sparse letter. My stomach sinks as I read the contents. Do you want to leave? It was 10 p.m. and my birthday was almost over. Almost 22 hours had passed and Luke still hadn't contacted me. 3 whole days of silence, not a single text, call, or explanation. Did he really have the nerve to let my birthday slip away like this? At first I thought he might be planning a surprise. I told myself he's just busy organizing something amazing. But the more time passed, the more that hope dimmed, leaving behind a suffocating mix of anger and sadness. As the hours ticked by, that hope turned into anger. By now I'd given up. I picked up my phone and started typing, pouring my frustration into the words. If you even bother showing up tomorrow, don't. We're done. The words sat heavy on the screen, my thumb hovering over the send button, resentment bubbling in my chest. Before I could press it, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. My stomach tightened. Unknown. Hi, miss me? My breath hitched. It had to be Luke. Me, Luke, where TF you been? You ignored me for days. Unknown. Chill, babe, been working on SMF special for you special. After 3 days of silence, he was seriously playing this off. Me, you ghosted me. Now you want to act like it's no big deal? Synth special better be good. Unknown, just trust me. You wanted a surprise, right? My hands trembled as I typed. The audacity of him to act so casual after everything. Me, surprise, it's 10 p.m., Luke, 2 hours till my B-day's over. Where are you? This time there was a pause before his reply. Unknown, look outside. I frowned, my stomach twisting. Slowly I walked over to the window and peeked out. There, under the faint glow of the street lamp at the crossroads, stood a figure, the light casting long shadows across the pavement. A man in a dark hoodie and a mask that covered most of his face waved at me. Me. Why tef you wearing a mask? You sick or something? Unknown, kinda. Anyway, left her gift outside your door, go grab it. I glanced back at the crossroads, but the man was gone. My unease deepened. Why wouldn't he just hand it to me? Why the mask? Still curiosity won. I opened the front door cautiously and there it was. A black box wrapped neatly with a red bow. I looked around the street one more time before bringing it inside. Back in my room, I locked the door. The box sat on my desk, its perfect wrapping almost mocking me. Slowly I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. I gasped, stumbling back. Inside the box was a head. Luke's head. It was disturbingly lifelike. His features were so perfect. His messy brown hair, the slight scar on his forehead. But the skin felt off. My fingers brushed against the skin and it felt rubbery, hollow, like a doll stuffed with soft material. But the resemblance was so perfect it made my stomach churn. I couldn't look at it anymore. I turned the head to face the wall and stepped back, trying to breathe through the rising panic in my chest. My phone buzzed again, the same unknown number flashing on the screen. I answered, my voice shaking. "What the hell is wrong with you? Do you think this is funny?" His voice came through the line, calm and steady. "Do you like it?" "No, I don't like it. Who in their right mind would think this is okay? After ignoring me for days, I thought you'd do something thoughtful. Something that showed you cared. But this is disgusting." His reply was colder now, his tone unsettling. "But you said you liked me. You said I was all you wanted, that nothing else mattered but us. That's different. This is... You said you liked me. You said you liked me. You said you liked me." The line went dead. But the voice didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was in the room. I turned slowly toward the head. The desk trembled beneath it as the voice grew louder, more frantic. The head turned on its own. Its eyes snapped open, bloodshot and filled with fury. Its lips twisted into a grotesque snarl, repeating the words like a chant. "You said you liked me. You said you liked me," I screamed, backing away until my back hit the wall. My mind scrambled for answers, but nothing made sense. "Luke," I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "If this is about Daniel, if this is because I kissed him, I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything. Daniel, it was a mistake. A stupid, impulsive mistake at a party last week. I'd kissed him, just for a moment, and regretted it instantly. I hadn't told Luke, I hadn't told anyone. But somehow he knew." The head stopped. The voice shifted, low and mocking. "Oh, sweetie, it's not about Daniel. He doesn't matter. It's always been just you and me." I stared in horror as the base of the head began to twist and shift. Something pale and fleshy emerged from where his neck should have been. "You see, I made arrangements," the head continued, its tone almost cheerful now. "A special doctor, someone who could preserve me, clone me. But the process wasn't finished in time. Only my head is ready, for now." My stomach churned as the base of the head began to twist and shift. Something pale and fleshy sprouted from the neck. Feet. Small, childlike feet, growing longer with every passing second. "This is my gift to you," the head said, its voice growing softer, almost tender. "Me. Forever, now, nothing can separate us." I pressed myself against the wall, shaking as the impossible unfolded before my eyes. The head, Luke's head, was growing a body. I turned to run, but his voice stopped me cold. "Happy birthday, baby." My daughter Emma is 4 and she's never seen her reflection. I know this because I've watched her look into mirrors her entire life and see only empty glass. I'm a developmental psychologist, specializing in early childhood cognition. Or I was, until my research led me to something no journal would ever publish. Something that explains why children under 5 can never recognize themselves in mirrors, no matter how many times we've tested them. It's not that they can't see themselves. It's that we've been wrong about what a reflection really is. The discovery started with a routine developmental study. We were replicating the classic Rouge test, putting a red dot on a child's face to see if they recognize their reflection. Standard procedure says children gain self-recognition between 18 and 24 months. But our data showed something impossible. The children's eye-tracking patterns indicated they were seeing something in the mirror, something that moved when they moved, something they were desperately trying not to look at. We expanded the study, thousands of hours of footage, children from different cultures, different environments, always the same pattern. Deliberate avoidance of their own reflection until approximately age 5. That's when I noticed the drawings. Emma, like most 4-year-olds, loves to draw. But she never draws herself. When asked to draw her family, she draws me, her father, her toys. But where she should be in the picture, there's always a dark shape. A void with too many angles. I started collecting children's self-portraits. Thousands of them, the pattern was undeniable. Before age 5, they all draw themselves the same way. Shapes that shouldn't exist, geometries that hurt to look at. Then came the recordings. We set up infrared cameras in the study room, standard mirrors, standard protocol. But when we reviewed the footage, the children weren't wrong. Their reflections weren't there. Something else was. I've watched the footage frame by frame, mapped the movements, created 3D models. What stands where a child's reflection should be is something that exists in more dimensions than our brains can process. Something that moves in perfect synchronization with our children, mimicking them, until they're old enough to generate a true reflection. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what happens at age 5. I found earlier studies, buried research, classified documents about mirror acquisition and reflection synthesis. They've known all along. At age 5, children don't gain the ability to see themselves in mirrors. They become reflections. Whatever cosmic horror exists on the other side of the glass, it's been raising our children, shepherding them, preparing them. Every time we hold our babies up to a mirror, we're letting them interact with their true caretakers. The things that teach them how to move, how to mimic humanity, until they're ready to generate a convincing reflection. Until they're ready to become one of them. I know this sounds insane, but I have proof. Emma turns 5 next week. Last night I set up cameras around her bedroom. Infrared, ultraviolet, every spectrum I could think of. At 3:33 a.m. she got up and went to her mirror. The footage shows. God, the footage. She pressed her hand against the glass.